Marcus Carter was 2 steps from boarding when the gate agent smiled and ripped his daughter's first-class ticket in half. Her hands trembled, the crowd watching but saying nothing. "They'll seat you where you belong," the agent said, voice sugar over steel. Marcus didn't argue. He just reached for his phone, and 5 minutes later, every flight in the terminal stopped. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The airport was alive with the hum of departures, the scent of coffee and jet fuel hanging in the air like the promise of somewhere new. Ethan Carter stood at the terminal window, watching planes taxi across the tarmac with the reverence of someone staring at moving constellations. Beside him, his younger sister Maya pressed her palms against the glass, grinning at the sight of a massive white jet pulling into the gate. It was their first time flying without an adult, their first time in first class, and every detail felt like part of a once-in-a-lifetime adventure. Their father, Marcus Carter, had surprised them that morning with 2 crisp boarding passes tucked inside a handwritten note. "For the best kids I know, go surprise your mom in Boston. First class. Because you deserve it." Ethan had folded that note into his wallet like it was a talisman. Maya had read it aloud 3 times on the ride to the airport, each time with the same squeal at first class. They'd arrived early, the way Marcus always insisted, giving them time to wander the terminal. Ethan took pictures of Maya in front of the departure board, pretending she was a world traveler. Maya insisted on a selfie with their first-class boarding passes, held up like golden tickets. The image caught them mid-laugh. Ethan's crooked grin, Maya's dimples, both faces glowing with the kind of unfiltered joy that belongs only to kids who still believe the world will treat them fairly. That illusion began to fracture the moment they reached Gate C1. At first it was subtle, the way a few passengers glanced up, then away. A woman in a navy cardigan frowned as the siblings approached the roped-off first-class boarding lane, clutching their tickets. 2 men in business suits shifted slightly, as if making space not for welcome but for separation. Ethan noticed but said nothing. Marcus had taught him to choose his battles, but something about the air here felt heavier. The gate agent, a woman with sharp cheekbones and an even sharper bun, looked up from her computer. Her expression was neutral for half a heartbeat, then cooled as her eyes flicked from Ethan to Maya, then down to the tickets in his hand. "Can I help you?" she asked, though her tone suggested the opposite. "Yes, ma'am," Ethan said politely, just as his father had drilled into him. "We're checking in for first class, Boston." He slid the tickets across the counter. She picked them up, scanned them, and then paused. Her brows knit slightly, and her lips pressed into a line. First class," she repeated, almost to herself. "And you're traveling alone?"
"Yes, ma'am," Ethan said again, standing a little straighter.
"Our dad booked it for us." Her eyes didn't soften. "First class isn't for unaccompanied minors," she said, as if reciting a fact carved in stone. "You'll need to wait. We'll reassign you to a more appropriate cabin." Maya's smile faltered, confusion flooding her face. "But," Daddy said. "It's policy," the agent interrupted, her voice firm. "First class is for adults and their families. We can't have unaccompanied minors up there. It's a safety matter." Ethan knew enough about flying to know she was wrong. He'd spent hours reading airline policies the night before, excited for the trip. First class had no such restriction. His father had told him so, and Marcus Carter didn't get facts wrong. Still, he hesitated. The other passengers could hear. Conversations had slowed. A man in a windowpane blazer was openly watching now, sipping his coffee like it was entertainment. "I think there's been a mistake," Ethan said carefully. "We're allowed. We even have the—" "Step aside, please," the agent said, her hand making a small shooing motion. "Other passengers are waiting to board." The boarding announcement chimed overhead, cheerful and oblivious. Maya tugged on her brother's sleeve, her eyes darting toward the growing line. Ethan's stomach tightened. This wasn't just about a seat anymore. It was about the way she was looking at them, like they were intruding on something not meant for them. A man in the first-class line leaned toward the agent, speaking in a low voice. Ethan couldn't hear the words, but he caught the glance, quick, cutting, dismissive, aimed at him and Maya. The agent nodded, then looked back at the siblings. Her voice was lower now, but colder. "We'll have you sit over there while we fix this." She pointed to a cluster of empty chairs off to the side, well away from the boarding lane. Ethan swallowed his frustration. He'd learned from his father that raising your voice too soon only made people stop listening. But inside, something sharp was pressing against his ribs. They moved to the chairs, Every few seconds, Ethan could feel eyes flick toward them. Some curious, some pitying, some indifferent. The boarding lane moved quickly now, as if the gate was eager to swallow up everyone else and be done with them. When the last of the first-class passengers had boarded, the gate area felt quieter, emptier. That was when the agent approached again, holding their boarding passes loosely between two fingers. Ethan felt a spark of relief. Maybe she'd fixed it, maybe she'd apologize. But the look on her face killed that hope instantly. "I've spoken with my supervisor," she said, voice clipped. "You won't be flying first class today. We'll reassign you to seats in the back. It's more suitable." She didn't wait for them to respond. In one deliberate motion, she tore both boarding passes in half, the sound crisp and final, the pieces fluttering to the floor like discarded promises. Maya gasped. Ethan froze, heat crawling up his neck. Around them, a few passengers watched openly now, their expressions unreadable. "You'll have to wait here until we can process the change," the agent said, already turning away. Her parting words were tossed over her shoulder, sharp as glass. "Security will come get you when we're ready." The torn pieces of their first-class tickets lay on the carpet between their feet, and somewhere deep inside Ethan, something began to burn. They weren't kicked out loudly. They were erased quietly. The sound of the torn tickets still seemed to hang in the air. Even as the gate agent walked away without a backward glance, the pieces lay scattered on the carpet, tiny shards of a promise their father had made. Ethan didn't move to pick them up. He knew if he did, his hands might tremble, and he didn't want anyone here to see that. Passengers continued to stream past, the soft roll of suitcases and the muted thud of boarding passes being scanned, marking the rhythm of their exclusion. Each traveler stepped into the jet bridge, into warmth and welcome, while the siblings were left standing in a cold pocket of the terminal that seemed to grow colder with every passing second. A woman in a gray scarf, headed for first class, glanced at them for half a heartbeat, her eyes flickering over their faces before landing on their sneakers, then away. Ethan could read the look, as clearly as if she'd spoken. "You don't belong here." Maya shifted beside him, her small fingers tightening around his arm. She was trying not to cry, her lower lip caught between her teeth, but he could feel the tremor in her hand. He'd seen that look before, the one she got when kids at school made jokes about her hair or her skin, as if she were a novelty. He wanted to say something to her, to make it better, but the words were trapped somewhere deep, stuck between his pounding heartbeat and the weight pressing down on his chest. Across the counter, the two gate agents leaned toward each other, speaking in hushed voices. Every now and then, one of them would glance in the siblings' direction, the quick dart of eyes that tried to pretend they weren't looking. Ethan wondered if they were discussing where to put them, the way people discuss where to set down luggage that doesn't fit in the overhead bin. He heard a chuckle from somewhere behind him, not loud, but sharp enough to cut through the white noise of the terminal. He didn't turn around. He'd learned that turning around sometimes gave people what they wanted, the chance to meet your eyes and confirm they'd gotten to you. He thought about what his father had told him once, sitting in the kitchen after a particularly bad day at school. "Ethan, the world will try to make you feel small. It'll do it in ways that are loud, and ways that are quiet. The quiet ways are the ones you have to watch for, because they're harder to prove and harder to fight." Right now, this was one of those quiet ways, and it was working. Maya's voice was barely above a whisper. "Do you think they think we're lying?" Ethan turned his head just enough to meet her eyes. "I think," he said carefully, "they've decided something about us that isn't true, and they don't care if it is or isn't." Her brows knitted together. "But Dad—" "I know," he said quickly, not wanting her to say his name too loud, not wanting to give anyone here more to twist. "Just sit tight." They sat in the far corner now, away from the boarding lane, on chairs that felt like they'd been placed there for people to wait for bad news. The last of the first-class passengers disappeared into the jet bridge, and the hum of the boarding area dimmed. From where they sat, Ethan could see the gate agent, now leaning back in her chair, scrolling through something on her computer. The other agent, a man with thinning hair, was speaking into a headset. Every so often, his eyes flicked toward Ethan and Maya before quickly returning to whatever was on his screen. Maya's knee bounced, her hands twisting together. "I don't like it here." He wanted to tell her it would be fine. He wanted to believe it himself. But there was a strange tightness in the air, like the pause before a storm breaks. A new group of passengers, coach this time, began to gather nearby for the next flight from that gate. Some glanced at the siblings curiously, maybe wondering why they were sitting off to the side, unaccompanied, their expressions guarded. Others didn't glance at all, their gaze sliding past as though ignoring the discomfort might make it vanish. That was the cruel thing about this kind of moment. It didn't come with shouting or slurs, nothing you could hold up as evidence. It came with the way people didn't look at you. It came with the way the air around you seemed to shift, to separate you from the flow of normal life. Ethan leaned back, trying to match the calm he'd seen in his father in tense situations. But inside he was keeping count, not of minutes but of the ways this day had been taken from them. The male gate agent stood, muttering something to his colleague. Then he began walking toward the siblings, his steps measured, his expression unreadable. Maya's grip on Ethan's arm tightened again. The man stopped a few feet away, looking down at them, as though from a great height. His voice was quiet, but carried a weight that made it feel heavier than if he'd shouted. "Security will be here soon," he said, "to take you somewhere more appropriate." The words hung between them, vague but loaded, the kind that made you feel guilty without even knowing the charge. Somewhere more appropriate. And in that moment, Ethan realized, they weren't just being moved to another seat. They were being removed. Maya looked up at her brother, her voice trembling. "Ethan, where do they think we're supposed to go?" But before he could answer, a pair of uniformed security officers appeared at the far end of the concourse, walking straight toward them. Sometimes the most dangerous sound in an airport isn't an alarm. It's a ringing phone. The security officers cut through the concourse with that unhurried, authoritative stride that made space open in front of them. Ethan felt Maya press closer. The torn stubs of their first-class tickets still carpeted the floor like confetti, after a party they weren't invited to. He swallowed hard and pulled out his phone. His thumb hovered for a second over his father's name. "Dad." Then the line rang once, twice. The third time, the call connected. "Ethan?" Marcus Carter's voice was low, the tone steady enough to feel like a hand on his son's shoulder. No surprise, no panic, only presence. It made Ethan's breath loosen just enough to speak. "Dad, we're at the gate." "They." He glanced up. The officers were 20 steps away. "They tore our tickets, said first class isn't for unaccompanied minors. Now security is coming." There was a heartbeat of silence on the line, not the empty kind, but the calculating kind. A mind turning over facts and angles. When Marcus spoke again, the words came with quiet precision. "What gate? When 14? What airline, flight number, and the names on the badges of the staff who spoke to you if you have them?" Ethan blinked. The woman with the bun. Her tag says Barnes. The guy's Miller. Airline is West Sky. Flight WS 187 to Boston. Time? Boarding started 10 minutes ago. Copy." Marcus's voice never rose, never rushed. "Is Maya with you?" "I'm here," Maya said, leaning toward the phone, her voice small. "Baby girl," Marcus said, and something soft threaded through the steel. "Look at your brother. What color are his shoelaces?" Maya blinked, glanced down. "Blue." "Good. That means I know exactly where you're standing in your minds. Focus on blue. Breathe with it. Ethan, listen to me carefully. I'm listening. You are not going anywhere with anyone, unless they can state your full names, your father's full name and the last 4 digits of my cell. You will remain visible, next to the gate counter. If anyone asks you to move, you reply, 'My father instructed us to wait here. He is on the line now.' And then you hand them the phone. You do not argue. You do not explain. You simply hold the line." "Okay." Ethan's shoulders settled by a degree he hadn't realized he was holding. "Put me on speaker," Marcus said. "Now." Ethan tapped the icon, set the phone on his knee just as the officers reached them. One was a woman with a kind-eyed face weathered by long shifts. The other, a man with a clipped mustache that tried to hide his fatigue. "Kids," the mustached officer said, hands open, palms visible. "The practiced choreography of 'we're here to help.' That doesn't always mean help. We've been asked to escort you to the unaccompanied minors lounge while they sort out your seating." Maya's throat bobbed. Ethan steadied his voice. "Our father is on the phone." "Sir," the woman officer said, nodding toward the device. "Can you identify yourself?" Marcus didn't waste syllables. "Marcus D. Carter, father of Ethan and Maya Carter. Before we move one step, please tell me the full names of the airline employees who initiated this contact and the policy cited." The officers exchanged a quick look, not hostile, just surprised that the voice on the phone didn't sound like a man scrambling to win favor. "Sir, we were told," The man began. Names, Marcus repeated evenly. And the policy. The woman cleared her throat. We have Gate Agent Barnes and Gate Agent Miller. We were informed there's a concern about minors in the first-class cabin. Understood, Marcus said. Please turn around with my children and walk them back to the gate counter. Do not take them to any secondary area. I'll hold. There was something in the way he said I'll hold that shifted the air. The officers glanced at one another again, then at the kids, then made their decision. All right, the woman said, tone gentler. Let's go talk at the counter. They walked the 10 steps back. The gate counter hummed with electronics and defensiveness. Agent Barnes didn't look up at first. Her fingers moved briskly over the keyboard, the deliberate busyness of someone who knows an answer is coming and doesn't want to meet it. Agent Miller hovered a half step behind, headset crooked. A supervisor had materialized as if from nowhere. A man with a glossy badge that read S. Keen, Gate Supervisor. He wore the expression of someone who thinks he's good at making problems evaporate. The officer stopped. Ethan set the phone on the counter, speaker still on. This is the father, the woman officer said, nodding toward the device. Mr. Carter requested we speak here. Supervisor Keen pasted on a neutral smile. Mr. Carter, this is Supervisor Keen with West Sky. I'm sure we can resolve this with a little cooperation. Your children were incorrectly booked in a cabin that— Stop, Marcus said softly. It was astonishing how quickly that one syllable erased Keen's smile. Before you continue, Supervisor, state the policy number and line that prohibits unaccompanied minors from occupying first-class seats on West Sky flights. Keen blinked. Well, the exact language. I'll save you time, Marcus said. There isn't one. Not in your tariff, not in your contract of carriage, and not in your internal guidance. I know because I have them open in front of me. Barnes finally looked up. Sir, we make judgment calls for safety. For safety, Marcus repeated, voice still even. You removed 2 black children with valid first-class tickets from the boarding lane, tore their passes, and summoned security. Security for what? Exactly. Their safety? Or your comfort? Silence pressed in. A few passengers nearby had eased closer the way people do when they sense a story growing legs. Phones hovered at chest level. Not quite recording. Not recording. Keen drew in a breath, squared his shoulders for a different tactic.
Mr. Carter, we understand your frustration. We'll rebook your children in Economy Plus at no additional charge and—
You will restore their original seats, Marcus said, and you will do it now. Sir Barnes said, first class is a premium environment. We can't be responsible for what? Marcus asked quietly. For other passengers' discomfort at seeing 2 black kids in a seat they paid for. Say it plain, Miss Barnes. If you're going to measure my children with that ruler, at least have the courage to read the numbers out loud. Color rose in Barnes's cheeks. Miller stared fixedly at his monitor like it had suddenly sprouted fireworks. Keen shifted, a tell he didn't know he had. Mr. Carter, Keen said, attempting brightness, let's avoid escalation. We're trying to accommodate within reason. Supervisor Keen, Marcus replied, I'll be very precise with you, because precision is the courtesy we extend to people we expect to take responsibility. My children will not be moved to a holding room. They will not be relocated to an inferior cabin. You will not separate them. You will not treat this as a discretionary judgment call. You will treat it as a documented incident. Do you understand? Keen's mouth opened, then closed. Something like impatience flickered across his face, the kind that appears when a man believes he's being challenged by someone who should be grateful instead. Sir, with respect, this is an internal matter. Nothing involving my children is internal, Marcus said, and nothing that smells like discrimination stays internal for long. The unexpected twist came from 6 feet to their right. A woman in an olive blazer, early 30s, had been pretending to scroll her phone. Now she stepped forward, the kind of decisive move that announces, I've decided to stop pretending. She lifted a lanyard from under her blazer. It flashed silver, contract investigator, airport operations. Supervisor Keen, she said, voice clear. I'm observing. Keen's head snapped toward her. I'm sorry, who authorized? Your airline did, she replied smoothly. Quarterly bias audit. Today's my spot check. Funny timing. She turned to Ethan and Maya with a brief human smile that didn't try to fix anything. I'm Alana Pierce. Ethan felt Maya's grip loosen just a little. On the phone, Marcus exhaled once, measured, Miss Pierce, please note the following for your report. Gate agents tore first-class boarding passes belonging to minors, cited a non-existent policy, and attempted removal via security. Timestamp is 13 minutes past the scheduled boarding call. My name is Marcus Carter. There was the faintest pause. Marcus Carter, Alana repeated. Recognition sparking. From Denali Systems. From Denali, Marcus confirmed. We maintain your runway telemetry and de-icing diagnostics under FAA contract. Keen's face did an involuntary thing then. A micro crack of surprise that lasted a fraction too long. His eyes darted to Barnes, then to Miller, then back to the phone as if the device had turned into a live wire. This was the other thing about Marcus Carter that most people didn't know until they had to. He wasn't just a calm father. He was a systems engineer turned CEO, whose company's software watched over takeoff metrics at 6 of the country's busiest airports. He spoke fluent bureaucracy, and could quote policy like scripture. And when policy hurt people he loved, he used it like a scalpel. Supervisor, Marcus said, each syllable wrapped in velvet and barbed wire. I'm going to ask you a question. Answer with care. Are you prepared to defend on record the assertion that Westsky prohibits unaccompanied minors in first class? Keen's jaw worked. We reserve the right. Reserve the right to what, Mr. Keen? Alana cut in gently. Discretion isn't a shield for disparate treatment. It's a mirror. It shows what you decide when no one is making you decide differently. Keen's eyes flicked to the line of passengers now fully, openly filming. The moment had mutated. What began as a small humiliation was sprouting an audience, and worse, receipts. Marcus's voice softened, almost kind. Here's what's going to happen. You'll print replacement first-class boarding passes for Ethan and Maya Carter. You'll document the incident. You'll preserve camera footage at this gate for the last 40 minutes. You'll refrain from moving my children from public view. And you'll remain at the counter while I make a call. A call to who? Keen asked, defensiveness curdling at the edges. Someone who can help you think clearly, Marcus said. Hold. The line clicked, not disconnected, but muted. The kind of deliberate silence that says I'm still here, just not for you at this second. Ethan could picture his father at his desk. The wall of diplomas and framed photos behind him, the binder with tabs for every airline's contract of carriage open, the second phone he kept for the calls that mattered. He reached for it now. The number he dialed was not a hotline, and not a friend. It was the personal cell of an FAA regional duty manager. A person whose job it was to worry about risk, and whose personal habit, after 3 years of working with Denali Systems, was to answer when Marcus Carter called. Danvers, came the voice on the other end. Marcus, you only ring me midday if a runway is freezing, or a runway metaphor is. It's the latter, Marcus said. West Sky, Gate C14, your airport. 2 minors, first-class tickets torn, a supervisor about to invent policy. I'm asking for a favor I can defend. A soft, unhappy exhale. You want a temporary hold? I want eyes, Marcus replied. I want someone with jurisdiction to ask why 2 black kids with paid seats were treated as a threat to premium environment decorum. There was a rustle. The sound of someone standing. You have them, Danvers said. 2-minute system pause on departures from Concourse C. While we verify there isn't a human factors issue at the gate, consider it a safety audit. Make it clean, Marcus said. No headlines. Not yet. Already done. Marcus unmuted the original line. Supervisor Keen? He said politely. You're going to receive a notification in about 5 seconds. Please read it carefully. Keen managed a scoff. Mr. Carter, with all due... The terminal speakers interrupted him with a bright, indiscriminate chime. The boarding monitors at C14 blinked, then refreshed. The gate printer stuttered to life, and spit out a narrow slip. Barnes snatched it, scanned it, and her mouth fell open before she smoothed it back into neutrality. Miller's headset crackled. His shoulders tightened. On the center screen above the counter, in clean blue type that tried not to sound alarming, a message appeared for staff only. Keen leaned forward to read. As his eyes crossed the second line, his expression changed. The easy managerial patience drained away, replaced by something that looked very much like fear trying on a smile. He looked up at Ethan and Maya, then at the phone as if it could see him. Mr. Carter, he said, voice suddenly careful. It appears we've received a directive. Ethan didn't know the specifics of whatever his father had set in motion. He only knew this. For the first time all morning, the power in the room had shifted. Keen swallowed, glanced at Barnes, and then said into his radio, All boarding pauses at C-14, effective immediately, supervisory review required. His eyes locked on the phone. Mr. Carter, who exactly did you just call? One voice can stop hundreds of engines. Supervisor Keene held the printout like it might burn him. The soft chime that preceded the system message echoed again, this time from neighboring gates. Overhead, the steady cadence of boarding calls hiccuped, then thinned to a nervous silence. The terminal soundscape, rolling suitcases, murmured conversations, the occasional hiss of an espresso machine, suddenly felt too loud without the PA's metronome telling everyone what to do next. Phones lifted, faces turned. The crowd's attention, which had hovered over Ethan and Maya like a weather pattern, shifted and fixed on the counter, on the airline staff, on the way power looked when it realized it had to explain itself. Agent Barnes tried to keep typing like nothing had changed, but her fingers missed a key and produced a stream of error pings. Agent Miller pressed 2 fingers to his headset and whispered a series of copy, understood that didn't sound like understanding. Keene cleared his throat and attempted a smile at no one in particular, a performance of calm for an audience that was already reading the subtitles. Something's wrong. Across the concourse, hall monitors flickered and refreshed. Where there had been gate numbers and boarding groups, now a clean, neutral banner scrolled, "System hold. Stand by for further instructions." The letters didn't scream, but they didn't need to. Every frequent flyer in earshot knew that a hold meant the invisible gears of the airport had seized. No plane pushed back. No plane took off. A rumor fluttered through the cluster of passengers nearest to C-14, gathering shape as it went. "Security breach," someone whispered, not knowing. "Celebrity arrival," someone else countered, hoping. A teenager with a hoodie and a gimlet stare said flatly, "Nah, this is bigger already." A few camera lenses had turned away from the kids and toward the name badges on Navy blazers. Ethan felt the shift like a temperature change. He didn't suddenly feel safe. You don't go from erase to scene without your hands still shaking. But he felt less alone in the seeing. Beside him, Maya's fingers, which had been clamped around his sleeve, loosened by degrees. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't naive. But the way she breathed slower, deeper, told him she recognized what he did. The story was no longer theirs to carry in silence. The woman officer who had first approached them stayed near, not hovering over the siblings but deliberately between them and the counter. A subtle redrawing of lines. She kept her voice low. "You two okay?" Maya nodded. A small, careful nod. Ethan said, "We're staying here. Our dad said so." "Good plan," the officer replied, eyes on the counter. She wasn't smiling either, but the way she stood said she understood something ugly had been set in motion before she arrived, and she wasn't going to pretend otherwise. Supervisor Keene finally found words. He leaned toward the phone, heat climbing his throat. "Mr. Carter, this is unnecessary. You've invoked a system-level review for what amounts to a cabin seat dispute." Marcus's answer came smooth and measured from the speaker. "I invoked a review for a safety pattern. Staff who are willing to invent policy under pressure are staff who will invent facts under stress. Aviation has taught me to respect patterns." Barnes bristled. "We didn't invent anything." Ulana Pierce, the contract investigator, lifted an eyebrow. "Then consistency will vindicate you." She turned her phone camera to face herself and the counter, not live streaming, just documenting. Timestamp 1441. "To the siblings, you two are doing exactly right." An unexpected tremor of solidarity rippled through the onlookers. A woman with salt and pepper curls stepped forward from the crowd, clutching a carry-on. "My son's 13, she said to no one and everyone. He had a business-class ticket once, saved all year from mowing lawns. Gate agent told him he'd be more comfortable in coach. I didn't have the fight in me that day. I've thought about it ever since." A bearded man with a quiet voice added, "I fly West Sky twice a month. I've seen this comfort talk before." He looked at Ethan, then at Maya. "I'm sorry." Barnes's cheeks darkened. "We're not having a trial at the counter," she snapped. "We're having accountability," Alana said. "It just sounds like a trial when you're used to not being asked questions." Keene tried a new angle. "Folks, please, let's not obstruct operations." As if on cue, the terminal PA coughed to life, then delivered a gentle corporate antiseptic. "Attention passengers, a brief systems check is in progress. Please remain near your gate. Thank you for your patience." A man in a blazer with metal pilot wings threaded through the crowd from the jet bridge, shoulders set with the kind of composure that comes from making weather calls that carry real consequences. He was in his late 40s, face lined in a way that suggested long-haul routes and longer nights. The nameplate above his pocket read CPT, L.R. Halbrook. "Supervisor," he said to Keene, "why is my push delayed?" Keene gestured vaguely toward the monitors. "Temporary hold. Will resume once the review is complete." Halbrook's gaze fell to the siblings, then to the shredded ticket still under the chair. The line of his mouth firmed. "What's the review for?" "Protocol," Keene said. "Unaccompanied minors in a premium cabin can be—" "Stop," the captain said, not unkindly, but with the finality of a man who has no interest in euphemism. "There's no prohibition. If there were, I'd know. Also, I watched these kids get turned away while another unaccompanied minor boarded my first-class cabin 2 hours ago, on the inbound." The hum of the crowd coalesced into a hush. Keene blinked. Barnes froze. Miller's eyes flickered to Keene, then away. The captain continued, voice steady. "She was white. No issue raised. I made a note." He held up his phone. "I keep notes." There it was. The twist. Simple and devastating. This wasn't a one-off misunderstanding. It had a mirror image with different faces, and a different outcome. Alana breathed out a single syllable that wasn't a word so much as a receipt. Keene's smile withered. "Captain, operational matters. Operational matters begin with whether we treat people as people," Halbrook said. "I can't sign off on a cabin manifest while this stands. If anyone needs me, I'll be in the jet bridge making a courtesy call to dispatch." He met Ethan's eyes not with pity but with a pilot's factual respect. "You two were supposed to be in seats 2A and 2B. I'll hold them. Don't move." He turned, disappeared into the tunnel of the jet bridge. And the sense of stagecraft intensified. This wasn't a police scene. It wasn't a brawl. It was something quieter and more dangerous. A system realizing it had witnesses. A teenage boy near the stanchions raised his phone slightly higher. He'd been recording for the past 5 minutes. A live stream, judging by the chat flares reflected in his eyes. 3,000 watching, he murmured. 5, 8. The number ticked like a Geiger counter. Hashtags began to sprout in the side-scrolling comments. "And first class while black. Let them fly. Policy or prejudice." Barnes noticed the camera and straightened as if posture could rewrite the last quarter hour. "Filming is not allowed at the counter," she said, the authority fraying in her voice. "It is," Alana said mildly. "Public area. And you're a public-facing service provider. Breathe." Keene's headset crackled. He pressed it to his ear. Listened. Went pale. "They're expanding the hold," he muttered, not intending to be heard. "Concourse wide." Marcus's voice returned on speaker, gentle as cotton over steel. "Supervisor Keene, here's the cleanest path. Admit error, reissue boarding passes. Apologize. You'll have my word on record that we will not file a complaint until after the flight cycle, so your crew isn't caught in the crosswind, or keep pretending this is about policy, and find out how many people consider your version of safety unsafe." Keene stared at the phone, then at the faces watching him, then at the children who were supposed to have been easy to usher into silence. He rubbed his temple, and for a moment Ethan saw the flicker behind the man. A person who had learned to confuse convenience with correctness, who now found himself without the first and asked for the second. "Print the passes," he said to Barnes, voice sanded down. "Seats 2A and 2B. Barnes's fingers hovered. Her jaw clenched. She looked like someone swallowing something sour. "The system won't let me issue upgrades during a hold." "They're not upgrades," Alana said lightly. "They're restorations." Before anyone could test the semantics, another voice cut in from the side. Crisp, professional. "Excuse me." A woman in a navy skirt suit, with the poise of a courtroom, stepped forward. Her badge identified her as Customer Relations, Region. "I've been informed of the situation by dispatch. Mr. Carter, I'm reaching out to you on a separate line now." Her phone buzzed. She answered. "Mr. Carter, yes. Understood." She lowered the device, then faced the count. "We are restoring the original tickets and offering a written apology." A murmur rippled. Relief. Vindication. A brief flicker of something like hope. Ethan felt Maya's shoulder drop against his. For a heartbeat he allowed himself to imagine the click of the printer, the white rectangles sliding out, the return of normalcy, imperfect but moving forward. Then the printer clicked, ground and spit out nothing. A blinking error chevron glared from its tiny screen. "Queue locked. FAA hold active." Keene's relief curdled. We can't print during a federal hold, he said too loud. No document changes. Then wait 60 seconds. The relations manager said, forcing brightness. The hold will clear. But instead of clearing, the monitors refreshed again, and the bland banner updated with a new line, on-site review en route. The whispering ratcheted, phones rose higher, even the officer beside the kids exhaled through her nose, like she'd just watched someone double down on the wrong hand. Maya, who had been quiet, tugged on Ethan's sleeve and nodded toward the window. Look, she whispered. The tug trucks stopped. On the apron outside, the choreography of ground crew had paused mid-routine, a freeze frame of neon vests and orange wands and idling tugs. It looked like a photograph of a busy machine that had decided to inhale and hold it. Keen's radio crackled again. He listened, swallowed, and when he spoke, the attempt at casualness had vanished. Everyone remain where you are. FAA is sending. He didn't finish. The crowd made space of its own accord as a man in a charcoal suit broke into a purposeful trot down the concourse, a lanyard bouncing against his chest. His ID badge caught the light, large letters impossible to miss, as he flashed it toward security and then raised it toward the counter.
FAA.
He didn't slow. He was coming straight for Gates. This wasn't the first time Marcus had to fight, it was just the first time the world would see it. The FAA official's stride ate the distance to gate C-14, the silver letters on his badge catching overhead light like a metronome. Phones lifted. A hush gathered itself into something that listened. Ethan and Maya felt the air tilt again, not toward them but toward the counter, toward the people who had torn their tickets and called it safety. The official didn't slow, and as he closed in, the siblings' speakerphone breathed their father's quiet, level presence into the space between heartbeats. Stay visible, Marcus said, his voice a low line they could hold like a rope. Shoulders back. You are not a problem to be managed. He'd said those exact words before, long before today. They lived in the kids like a muscle memory. A memory flickered. The Carter's kitchen. A Saturday morning years ago. Maya was 8, Ethan 11, both in pajamas. The news had shown a clip of a black family being told they were in the wrong line at a hotel breakfast, because the attendant assumed they weren't guests. Marcus had muted the TV and turned to his kids with a patience that was never far from urgency. Listen, he had said, elbows resting on the table, fingers steepled. Racism wears uniforms, but it also wears smiles. Sometimes it arrives loud, easy to name. Sometimes it shows up as a policy that no one can quite find in writing, applied only to the people who look like you. When you feel that, don't shrink to fit it. That's the trick. It wants you small. Maya had asked, what do we do? You ask questions in complete sentences. Marcus replied. You keep your voice even. You take notes. You say, could you show me where that rule is written? And when they can't, you stand still. Because the moment you move, they call it cooperation, and close the book. Now, at C-14, his instructions unfolded in real time. Ethan felt his own voice return to him, steadier than a minute ago. He lifted his chin. Maya matched him, the two of them aligning by habit and love. The FAA official reached the counter. Up close, he looked younger than his job title suggested. Mid-30s, thread of gray at one temple like a streak of lightning. He flashed his credentials without flourish. Leonard Ruiz, FAA Regional, he said, tone professional, not performative. We have a reported irregularity with gate procedures and passenger treatment. Who's the supervisor on scene? Keen straightened. That would be me. Good, Ruiz said. Then you'll walk me through it. He glanced at the siblings and at the phone on the counter. And you'll do it where everyone involved can hear. He didn't sit. He didn't retreat to a back office. He set his notebook down in plain view, a small intentional refusal to let the conversation slip into the kind of hallway where truth turns soft. Ruiz's presence triggered another memory that didn't belong to Ethan or Maya, but to the man in their speaker, Marcus, 19, at gate B9 of an airport, with orange seats and the smell of old carpet. He had a suit borrowed from his cousin, and a manila folder with resumes he'd printed 2 nights before at a 24-hour copy shop. A summer internship interview waited on the other end of the flight, the kind that could widen the aperture of a life. It was his first time flying alone in a blazer. He arrived early, the way he always would. When boarding began, he joined the line, handed over his paper ticket, and heard it, the snap of authority pretending to be procedure. Random screening, the agent said flatly. Step aside. Marcus had stepped aside. 3 other passengers in line, all white, had sailed through untouched. He watched the clock. He watched his plane. He watched his chance shrink with the shifting of a suited man's eyebrows. "Can you tell me how you selected me?" Marcus had asked, polite, precise. "It's random," the man had repeated, eyes already on the next traveler. Marcus had been escorted to a secondary area, his tie removed, his belt fed through a machine, twice as if it might confess if asked again. The plane pushed back without him. He made the next flight. He arrived late for the interview. Apology folded into apology. The firm called 3 days later. "We've moved forward with other candidates." He had never proven that the screening cost him the job. He never forgot the sound of the agent's voice saying random like a verdict. Years later, he discovered that airport's random was a list printed in a break room, profiles mentioned in the margins. He mailed a letter. He received a pamphlet response about commitments to fairness. He kept the pamphlet. That was when the habit began. Marcus collected paper. Policies, memos, rules. He learned to speak their language so they could not be used as a dialect to exclude him. Back at C-14, Ruiz uncapped his pen. "Agent Barnes," he said, tone even. "Report your understanding of events from the moment these passengers approached the lane." Barnes's eyes tightened. The miners attempted to enter a first-class boarding lane, unaccompanied. "For safety, we exercise discretion." "Source?" Ruiz asked, still calm. "Source? The written policy that defines your discretion and its limits." Barnes glanced at Keene. "It's internal guidance." "Good," Ruiz said. "Then provide it. If you don't have it, say so." Barnes opened her mouth, closed it. "I don't have it." Ruiz nodded, as if she'd answered an algebra problem. He looked to Keene. "Supervisor?" Keene swallowed. The judgment was made considering cabin dynamics. "Which are, first class is a premium space," Keene said, doing what men do when they have only tone to fill a gap. "We manage passenger expectations." Ruiz didn't blink. "Whose expectations?" Keene faltered. "Those who purchase premium product." 2 miners with paid first-class tickets are not those people, Ruiz asked mildly. "Or is your point that their age disqualifies them?" "For safety," Barnes interjected, grasping again. "Then you have incident logs," Ruiz said, very gently, "to justify the safety concern. Prior disruptions caused by unaccompanied minors in first class, for example." Barnes stared. Miller's headset suddenly required all his attention. Ruiz turned a page in his notebook. A soft sound like a hinge opening. "Miss Pierce?" he said, glancing at the investigator. "Your presence?" "Quarterly bias audit," Alana replied. "Assigned to West Sky 4 months ago, after a complaint from a vendor flagged patterns in gate-level discretion. I pulled arrival logs today. I've already documented a contrasting treatment of an unaccompanied white minor in the same cabin on the inbound." There it was, unexpected to everyone but Marcus. The audit hadn't been random either. Ethan's eyes flicked to the phone. "Dad?" he whispered, not needing an answer, needing only to know that the fight he was watching had been staged with the care of someone who loved him. Marcus's voice came like a steady hand on a wobbling bicycle. "You're doing fine." Another memory rose, this one intact as a photograph. Last winter, the Carters in the living room, a storm softening the windows with drifting snow. Maya had asked if there were safe places where people didn't get small. Marcus had taken a breath and told them about a different airport, not long ago, where a junior supervisor had called 2 black employees quota hires in front of passengers. Marcus had filed a complaint. The airline had offered discount vouchers in the same envelope as their apology. He had sent the vouchers back. He'd written instead to the airline's risk office, "You have a training problem," masquerading as customer service. He had attached examples. He had suggested a specific trainer. He had copied one person at the FAA, whose title contained the word human factors, because he knew from experience that people responsible for safety understood the economy of small disrespect, the way 100 tiny cuts could make a bad decision bleed into a crisis. West Eye replied months later, promising a review. The promised trainer was in procurement. The language was careful, the timing casual. Marcus logged the dates. He kept the letters. Now 4 gates from the coffee smell and 3 feet from the shredded tickets. The consequence of all those papers and all that patience arrived in a charcoal suit with a badge. Ruiz drew a slow breath. He gestured toward the siblings. "We're going to do something we don't do often enough," he said, meeting Keene's eyes. We're going to consider the human factors in real time. He faced Ethan and Maya. Would you tell me in your own words what happened when you approached the gate? Ethan's mouth went dry. But the words came. He kept them simple, the way his father had taught him. We showed our tickets. We were told first class isn't for unaccompanied minors. She tore our passes. They told us security would take us somewhere more appropriate. Maya added, voice barely above a whisper. People stared like we did something wrong. Ruiz wrote, his pen catching each syllable. Thank you, he said, and it sounded like he meant it. He turned back to the counter. Supervisor Keene, until I complete this review, you will refrain from moving these passengers. You will preserve the last hour of gate camera footage, and you will retrieve the torn ticket stubs and place them in an envelope as part of the record. Barnes hesitated. The woman officer stepped forward, reached to the floor and gently collected the torn pieces, setting them on the counter with the respect due to something that never should have been broken. Keene's eyes cut to the monitors, as though salvation might appear there. The banner continued to scroll its bland reassurance. The terminal felt like a stage awaiting the next line. Ruiz's phone vibrated. He glanced down, then up. Mr. Carter, he said toward the speaker, the faintest hint of recognition coloring his professional cadence for the first time. We've met on a safety symposium panel. Denver. 2 years ago. Marcus's chuckle was small and rueful. We disagreed about pilot fatigue thresholds, and then agreed over bad coffee. Ruiz's mouth twitched. That's the one. He sobered. I'm on site. I'm gathering facts. Is there anything you want placed in the immediate record? Yes, Marcus said. Document that this is not an isolated event. Document that I notified this airline's risk office 4 months ago of a pattern at the gate level, and that today's captain corroborated deferential treatment on the inbound. He paused, and the pause softened before it hardened. And document this. My children will board their original seats, not because of who I am, because of who they are. For a second, something like weather moved through the crowd. The feeling of standing near a person who refuses to negotiate their own dignity. Keene set his jaw. Mr. Ruiz, with respect, your presence is appreciated, but FAA doesn't direct seating assignments. Correct, Ruiz said evenly. We don't. We review safety and compliance behavior by certificated operators and their agents. Today, that behavior includes gate-level discretion. You'll want your decisions to read well later. Miller's headset hissed. He flinched. Dispatch wants status, he muttered. Alana's thumbs moved over her phone. Notes, not tweets. She watched the way Keene swallowed, the way Barnes's eyes skittered, the way people behave when the mirror is held steady and close. Ethan glanced at Maya. She had stopped wringing her hands. She wasn't smiling. She rarely smiled when she was bracing. But the tremor had left her shoulders. She stood as if the floor had decided to be on her side. Ruiz closed his notebook. We're pausing here, he said. No more improvisation. He lifted his eyes to Keene. Barnes. Then to the woman from customer relations. You will not detain, relocate, or reassign these passengers absent a written verifiable policy you can produce now. Is that clear? No one answered. Silence, which had once been the tool used on the siblings, now worked against the staff who'd wielded it. The woman officer cleared her throat gently. I'll stay with them, she said, addressing Ruiz, until the decision is made. Thank you, Ruiz replied. He checked his watch, then looked down the concourse. We're expecting one more party in this conversation. Who? Keene asked, irritation threading through his caution. We have everyone we need. Ruiz's gaze returned to the phone, and for the first time since he'd arrived, his tone shifted from neutral to something almost personal. Not cozy, but known. Your clock just ran out on treating this as a small matter. He nodded toward the glass doors at the far end of the concourse, where security had just swiped someone through. Mr. Carter is on his way, and you will explain everything to him. The heads at C-14 turned as a tall figure in a dark coat stepped off the escalator and broke into a quiet, relentless walk toward the gate, the phone in his hand still connected to the one on the counter. Injustice thrives in silence, until someone turns on the microphone. Marcus Carter's approach was deliberate. Every step toward gate C-14, cutting through the terminal's murmured hum. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't rush. But he carried himself like someone who'd been summoned to a meeting he had already prepared to win. The phone in his hand stayed connected, still transmitting his breath into the speaker resting on the counter in front of Supervisor Keene. Ruiz, the FAA official, didn't turn to greet him. He simply stepped aside, clearing a path between the crowd and the gate desk. The passengers, sensing they were about to witness the turning of a tide, instinctively shifted too, creating an aisle Marcus didn't have to ask for. Ethan and Maya saw their father before they heard him. He wore a dark coat, travel-worn but pressed, with the collar turned up against the airport's overzealous air conditioning. His eyes found them first. A quick assessment, a silent question before flicking to the shredded tickets in the evidence envelope on the counter. "Sir," Ruiz said. "Thank you for coming promptly." Marcus inclined his head. "I was already moving," he said simply, his voice carrying just far enough to reach the first ring of onlookers, without needing to climb. Keen's attempt at composure had eroded since Ruiz's arrival. But now, with Marcus standing in front of him, the sweat along his hairline betrayed more than just the temperature. "Mr. Carter," he began, "I'm sure we can resolve." Marcus raised a hand, not to silence him but to pause the predictable script. "Before we get to resolution, we're going to agree on what happened. Clarity first, then correction." Barnes shifted behind Keen, avoiding eye contact. Miller pretended his headset was feeding him something urgent, though the only voice on it was his own conscience. Phones began lifting higher. The air was taut, not the chaos of a shouting match, but the quiet electricity of people realizing the power in the room had realigned. Ruiz opened his notebook again. "Supervisor Keen, please repeat your earlier explanation for Mr. Carter's benefit." Keen's throat worked. "Two unaccompanied minors attempted to board first class. For safety, our discretion, which you cannot cite in policy," Ruiz said, his tone unchanged. Marcus's eyes didn't leave Keen's. "And which was not applied to the unaccompanied white minor on the inbound flight," he added, the sentence as level as if he were reciting the date. The ripple through the crowd was subtle but real. Alana Pierce, the contract investigator, shifted her phone slightly to catch Keen's reaction. Keen's lips tightened. "That was a different situation." "No," Marcus said. "That was a different passenger." The situation was identical. What changed was the complexion of the child holding the ticket. Barnes exhaled sharply, like the air had gone stale. Ruiz turned the page in his notebook. "Supervisor, I recommend you answer plainly. Deflection will read poorly in the record." Keen hesitated, and in the hesitation the narrative began to leak out of his control. Behind them, passengers moved closer. Someone whispered, "He's got them." Another said, "Finally." The quiet was becoming something else. A form of public pressure, eyes turning into witnesses. That was when the first unexpected move came. The woman from customer relations, who had been silent since promising to restore the tickets, stepped forward with a thin smile. "Miss Carter, I'd like to offer on behalf of West Sky complimentary upgrades for your children to our Premier Elite service for this flight, plus vouchers for future travel and my personal apology for any inconvenience." It was a polished performance, words that sounded generous enough to impress the crowd, positioned like an exit ramp from the moment. Maya glanced at Ethan, unsure. Ethan looked at his father. Marcus didn't even glance at the vouchers she was holding. "My children already had the seats you're offering," he said. "You don't get to frame restoration as generosity." The crowd shifted again, a small swell of approval from strangers who'd seen too many moments get buried under a nice resolution. Ethan's voice surprised even himself. "No thank you," he said quietly, but firmly. "We'll just take the seats we were supposed to have." Barnes blinked at him like he'd spoken out of turn, but Marcus's mouth lifted just slightly at one corner. Not a smile but a nod toward his son's growing spine. Alana tapped a note into her phone. "Declined token settlement," she murmured. The customer relations rep's smile thinned. "I understand," she said, though her eyes said otherwise. She stepped back, letting the air return to the tension it couldn't escape. Ruiz looked at Keen. "Your next move, Supervisor." Keen's jaw shifted. "I'll need clearance to reissue boarding passes during the hold," he said. "Which you'll request now," Marcus replied. On speaker. Keen hesitated, but under the weight of eyes, FAA investigator, father and half the concourse, he tapped his radio and began speaking to dispatch, voice low. While he spoke, Marcus turned slightly toward Ruiz. "How long is the hold?" Ruiz checked his watch. "Until the review is complete, or until FAA clears risk. Right now, every plane in this concourse is waiting. And every passenger knows it's because of what happened here," Marcus said, his voice pitched to carry. It landed exactly as intended. A man in the back muttered, "Good. Let them feel it." A woman near the stanchions murmured, "About time someone made it matter." Keen finished his radio call, looking paler. They'll allow issuance once the hold lifts. Marcus nodded once, then addressed Ruiz. We'll wait here, in the open. It was a small sentence, but it held weight. We're not moving, and we're not hiding. Barnes busied herself with her keyboard. Miller kept his eyes on the floor. Keene dabbed at his hairline with a handkerchief that looked like it had been folded more neatly that morning. Then, without warning, the terminal's PA system crackled, the kind of all gates announcement that usually means weather or evacuation. The voice that followed was calm, clipped, and absolutely clear. Attention all passengers in Concourse C. Please remain seated. Special security review in progress. Boarding will resume once the review is complete. Thank you for your cooperation. The crowd went still. Passengers who'd been shifting from foot to foot now sat. Coffee cups were set down. The space around gate C14 felt suddenly sealed, like the pause between a held breath and an answer you can't take back. Ruiz's phone buzzed in his hand. He glanced at the screen, then at Marcus. You'll want to hear this, he said. It's from someone who says they know exactly how this started, and it's not the first time. Social media moves faster than any plane. By the time the PA finished instructing Concourse C to sit tight, the story had already slipped its leash. The teenage boy in the hoodie, the one who had quietly live-streamed the first cracks at gate C14, watched his view counter leap like a heart monitor. Comments streaked up the screen in colored rivers. This is messed up. Name the airline. Where's their parent? Don't move, little man. Record everything. He angled his phone to catch the tableau. The FAA official standing calm and ironclad. Supervisor Keene wiping his brow. Agent Barnes pretending the keyboard was the hill she'd die on. Ethan and Maya anchored at the edge of the counter, their father a dark, steady presence between them and the people who had tried to make them small. 2 gates over, a woman in a denim jacket with a rolling tote paused mid-step, earbuds dangling. She was a micro-influencer who made flight hack videos and hotel reviews. She lifted her phone, recorded a quick intro, and slid the footage into a caption that didn't mince words. Saw 2 black kids get their first-class tickets torn at the gate. FAA now on site. I'll update. She hit post. Her followers 100,000 strong did the rest. At the C14 podium, Ruiz's phone rattled again with the impatience of a city waking up. He silenced it without looking, eyes on the counter steady as a metronome. Marcus didn't seem to notice the cameras pointed his way. His attention stayed on his children, on the FAA, on the desk where contrition and evasion were wrestling for control of West Sky's face. But he knew the phones were there. He'd built software on the premise that when enough sensors watch a system, the system behaves better. People were no different. Mr. Ruiz, a voice called from the back. Is the concourse locked down? It's a standard system hold, Ruiz replied, not looking back. Stay comfortable and we'll move when we're done. The hold wasn't comfortable for everyone. In a small windowless office behind a frosted door marked communications, 3 people in West Sky blue blazers were realizing that silence, once their friend, now had the bite of a trap. The PR manager, a woman named Kayla with a neat bun and a migraine blooming behind her eyes, stabbed at her keyboard. On one monitor, a tweet with the denim jacket influencer's video climbing past 50,000. On another, a Slack channel pulsing red with ag here tags from marketing, legal, and operation. What do we have? Asked a man with a headset, and the flinty patience of someone who lived in crisis mode. He was Ops PR, the person who turned smoke into fog and hoped no one asked why they were coughing. Kayla read from the screen, her voice taking on the dazed cadence of triage. Live streams, multiple POVs, on-site FAA, hashtags are trending, con first class, while black, policy or prejudice, let them fly. We're getting media emails, local affiliates and one national producer, asking for a statement. Do we have the facts? Legal asked. We have the optics, Ops said. Which wasn't the same thing, and everyone knew it. Kayla's phone trilled with the chirp she dreaded. A calendar invite from corporate communications with subject, immediate draft holding statement. She exhaled. We need 30 words, she said to the room, that don't make this worse. Legal moved to the whiteboard and wrote, we take allegations seriously. Under it, we are investigating. Then, we value all passengers. Ops added, safety is our top priority. Kayla capped the marker slowly. If I were reading that, she said quietly, I'd throw my phone across the room. They stared. Then, to her credit, she erased safety and wrote dignity instead. The sentence looked unusual in corporate ink, like a wildflower in a lobby planter. Back at C14, The boy in the hoodie laughed once without humor. They're trying to drop a statement, he murmured to no one. I can feel it. An older woman in a crimson scarf folded her arms. They can't write themselves out of what I saw. The crowd had become chorus and camera. A bearded man angled his phone to show Korean countertop, FAA badge, and a blur of glistening sweat on Keen's brow. A college student with glitter on her cheekbone whispered into her mic, "This is why you always record." The moment someone says the word policy, that's your cue. Agent Barnes caught the lens flaring her way and flinched. She was realizing how tiny a keyboard looks when the world is staring. Marcus's attention cut sideways, just for a second, at the low ping that meant a text on his second phone, the number he didn't give to many people. He ignored it. He didn't break eye contact with the present. The messages didn't care. They found other eyes. Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket with so much insistence, he finally fished it out, glancing at the screen, as if it might be dangerous. "Ma'am, are you okay? Uncle Jay, call me. Unknown. I'm at C12. Saw what happened. Do you need water?" He swallowed and put the phone away. His job was to stay visible and still, and he could do one good thing at a time. Maya, smaller and more porous to the air around her, couldn't help hearing the murmurs ripple. They were a strange cocktail. Solidarity, anger, voyeurism, helplessness, theater. Somewhere in the middle of it, a small girl in braids and a unicorn hoodie tugged her mother's sleeve and whispered, "Those kids, they're brave." The mother squeezed her daughter's hand and whispered back, "They're doing what they should never have had to learn." Ruiz continued with the slow work of accountability. "Supervisor Keen," he said evenly, "confirm you've preserved the gate camera footage." Keen nodded. "Yes." "Confirm the names on duty and their timestamps." He rattled them off. His voice had the brittle shine of someone who despised being thorough only when it wasn't his idea. Alana typed without looking up. She knew the two kinds of truth. The kind people tell you because it costs them nothing, and the kind they tell you because they've run out of ways to avoid sounding worse. This was the latter. Unexpectedly, the voice of the pilot, Captain Halbrook, returned from the jet bridge. Quieter, pitched for Ruiz and Marcus but swallowed by microphones anyway. "Dispatch is holding my crew. They'll wait." He glanced at the siblings, then at Marcus. "I'll sit on that cabin until this is resolved. I've told my person." "Thank you," Marcus said, and he meant it in the simple human way that isn't PR and isn't policy. Gratitude for a person choosing to be a person. Somewhere behind them, an airport PA chimed again, and a different voice, a harried supervisor, tried to soothe the concourse with a blanket statement. "We appreciate your patience during this routine systems check." A man in row 20 of the listening audience snorted. "Routine, my foot." If the PR team had needed a litmus test, they had it now. The public had already decided what the words routine and policy would mean today. Inside the communications room, Kayla clicked open an email with the subject line, "Press inquiry, urgent from a national morning show. We're hearing reports of an FAA hold related to a discrimination incident at your airport. Do you have a comment?" She typed, paused, backspaced until the screen went blank again. She didn't know it yet, but a junior social media manager 3 floors up had just made the first consequential choice of her young career. She replied to no one, recorded the denim jacket influencer's video, and DM'd it to her own private group chat with the caption, "If our bosses try to spin this, I'm quitting." The message felt like a match pressed close to paper. The rumor machine gulped oxygen. Threads appeared on Reddit. A law professor quote tweeted the denim jacket with a cool, lethal breakdown of contract of carriage and public accommodations. A high school teacher posted a shot of his class on their Chromebooks, half the students already watching the C14 live stream during a test prep period. In that spreading fire, a twist caught. A new account posted a grainy clip from a different angle, shot earlier, with the caption, "Minutes before FAA showed up." It showed Agent Barnes, leaning toward a whispering passenger in a windowpane blazer, registering his complaint with a nod. The audio was messy, but one phrase cut through, "Premium environment." Then lower, "We try to keep it consistent." A swarm of captions exploded. "Consistent how? Say it out loud. Consistency isn't the same as fairness." Barnes went gray. "That's taken out of context," she hissed to Keen. "Everything is out of context when you hate the context," Alana said softly, not unkindly. A senior man in a fishing cap near the window spoke up, voice rough with old anger. "I was 9 when they told my granddad he couldn't eat at a counter with white men. They said it was policy. Funny thing about policy, it's always a person talking. Ethan heard that and felt something settle. Not like dust but like resolve. He thought of his father's kitchen table lessons. Of the words don't shrink to fit it. He straightened without thinking. Marcus's second phone buzzed again, insistent now, the vibration like a finger tapping. He finally glanced down, expecting another reporter or a colleague offering cover. What he saw was a name he didn't expect. Sasha, Denali Ops. She rarely texted. When she did, it mattered. We just got pinged by a ramp tech at your airport. The message read, he follows our safety blog. Says he filmed something earlier. Marcus's brows lifted a millimeter. What's something? He typed with his thumb, eyes still on the gate. Sending link. Says it shows the moment the kids were turned away from behind the counter.
Marcus's pulse ticked faster. Not adrenaline, exactly, but the sensation of a puzzle piece clicking into place. Behind the counter meant employee perspective. He looked up, measuring the timing. He could keep his face level, and his voice steady and still be curious.
The link arrived with a second buzz. A private video. Unlisted, timestamped 26 minutes earlier. Uploaded by a handle that suggested a ramp worker with a sense of humor. Marcus tapped it. The thumbnail froze on the edge of the counter. The glossy black of a credit card reader. A sliver of Agent Barnes's sleeve. And in the blurred near foreground, two small figures holding white rectangles like flags. He didn't press play. Not yet. He let the screen dim again. This moment belonged to the public. To Ruiz and Alana and two children refusing to sit anywhere but in their own dignity. When it was time to show the inside angle, out in the concourse, a local reporter had arrived with a camera on her shoulder, and a producer with a hair comb, and a face that knew the choreography of permission. They didn't push forward, they held position, finding keystone shots, the FAA badge, the shredded tickets in a plastic envelope, a brother and sister standing like the axis of a story. Their newsroom was already cutting B-roll, plain tails, blinking runway lights, a slowly spinning baggage carousel, indifferent to any human scandal above it. Kayla's draft statement popped onto the airline's shared document. It was cleaner than the whiteboard. We are aware of a customer incident at Gate C14. We are pausing operations in Concourse C out of an abundance of caution. While we review, we are committed to dignity, equity, and transparency. We will share more shortly. She hated it, but she also knew it was the best they could do from a chair. 3 doors down from the fax. She hit send to legal. Legal added if true after incident. Ops removed it. The track changes bled. Push it. The VP texted. Kayla hesitated. She could almost hear the teenagers in the concourse correcting her tone in real time. She pushed it anyway. Within 60 seconds the replies arrived like hail. Show the kids boarding passes then. Show the apology. Show the policy. Ruiz checked his watch again. We're closing the fact-finding window, he said. Final input before I make my recommendation? No one from West Sky volunteered. The silence made its own case. Marcus nodded once. Recommend restoration, and written apology, he said. Recommend training that sticks. Ruiz's phone buzzed yet again. A different tone, deeper. The one that meant inside baseball. He answered. Listened. Said. Understood, and ended the call. He turned to the counter. We're releasing the hold in phases. But before we do, Supervisor Keene, I want you to hear something. He glanced toward Marcus. It appears there's another angle of the initial interaction. Barnes stiffened. That's illegal. It's not, Alana said. Not in a public-facing zone. In the twitch of a dozen mouths you could see 100 small calculations. People considering the line between exposure and justice. Between cameras as shields, and cameras as weapons. The boy in the hoodie leaned into his mic, voice low and crackling with the electricity of live news. Yo chat, they got a new video. The comment stream erupted. Marcus lifted his second phone again. The ramp text link glowed like a small blue door. Another message blinked onto the screen from the same number before he could tap. I sent this 20 minutes ago, sir. Before you even got to the gate. You should see what she says right before she tears the tickets. Marcus raised his eyes slowly, thumb hovering over the play icon, as the FAA official and half the concourse leaned in, and realized the most decisive evidence of the morning had reached his pocket before he'd even arrived. Some people walk into a room, others shift its gravity. Marcus Carter didn't so much arrive at Gate C14 as alter the space around it. The crowd didn't part for him out of spectacle. They did it the way water moves aside for something larger than itself. He wasn't alone. Flanking him were two individuals in tailored suits. Not the stiff navy of airline security, but the clean charcoal of federal transport officials. Their badges flashed USDOT and Federal Transit Oversight, catching in the glassy terminal lights like slow lightning. Ruiz, the FAA official already on site, stepped forward but didn't speak. The respect in his eyes was subtle, professional, the kind given to someone who'd been in the trenches and knew the maps by heart. Marcus's coat moved just enough to show the edge of a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. In his other hand was the phone he'd been on since his children called him, still unlocked, still on the call. He glanced once at Ethan and Maya. His gaze lingered for less than a second, just long enough to ask without words. "Are you both okay?" Maya gave the smallest nod. Ethan met his father's eyes with something that looked like a mirror of that question. "Are you?" Keen, the gate supervisor, cleared his throat, stepping into what he must have thought was the center of the conversation. "Mr. Carter, you'll address my first question before you offer any script," Marcus said without looking at him. His tone wasn't sharp, but it cut all the same. "Where are my children's boarding passes?" Keen blinked. "They were voided." "Not voided," Marcus said, finally looking at him. "Destroyed." He gestured toward the evidence envelope sitting between Ruiz's notebook and Barnes's keyboard. "You'll return what remains of them to my possession now." Barnes hesitated, glancing at Keen. "That's an FAA request," Ruiz said flatly, making it no longer optional. Barnes slid the envelope across the counter. Marcus took it without ceremony, slipping it into the inside pocket of his coat, like something worth archiving. "Next," Marcus said, his voice still steady, "you will give me in writing the stated reason for my children's removal from the first-class boarding lane, citing the specific policy, section, and subsection on which that decision was based." Barnes opened her mouth, closed it. Keen's throat bobbed. "I can have something drafted." "You'll have it written now," Marcus said, "by hand on a blank incident form, with your signature and today's date. If you can't cite policy, you'll state that as well. And when you finish, you'll hand it to Mr. Ruiz here, so we can all confirm accuracy." The two federal transport officials who had walked in with Marcus positioned themselves slightly behind him, watching but silent. They weren't here to argue. They were here to witness, and their very presence was its own form of pressure. The crowd felt it. The passengers who'd been whispering now leaned in, not to gawk, but to see the mechanics of a shift they rarely got to witness. The moment someone stopped trying to persuade and started making it expensive to keep pretending. Keen finally reached for the form. The sound of the pen scratching across the page was louder than the murmur of the concourse. Barnes busied herself with the keyboard again, though the screen in front of her no longer seemed to have her full attention. Marcus didn't fill the silence with extra words. He let the discomfort do its work. When Keen set the pen down and slid the form toward Ruiz, Marcus's eyes flicked over it once, reading. "No policy cited," Marcus said aloud. "For the record. Decision described as judgment for cabin environment consistency." He looked directly at Barnes. "Cabin environment consistency, meaning what exactly?" Barnes didn't answer. "Noted," Marcus said, and returned his gaze to Ruiz. Unexpectedly, the taller of the two officials who had come with Marcus spoke for the first time. His voice was even but carried the resonance of someone used to depositions. "For the record," he said, "I am Michael Torres, Federal Transit Oversight. We are currently compiling data on discretionary passenger treatment across all federally regulated carriers. The term cabin environment consistency will be flagged for review as potentially subjective to bias application." The crowd didn't fully understand the jargon, but they caught the undertone. That phrase, the one Barnes had used so casually, was now radioactive. Marcus turned slightly, enough to place one hand on the counter beside Ruiz's notebook. "We're not moving my children anywhere until their original seats are reinstated, and boarding is restored without further incident," he said. "If that means this concourse sits another hour, so be it." Keen's jaw worked. "I need clearance from dispatch." "Then get it," Marcus said. The exchange was interrupted by one of Ruiz's colleagues, arriving from the opposite end of the concourse. He was moving at a brisk, deliberate pace, a thick, sealed envelope in his hand. He stepped up to Ruiz and murmured something too low for the crowd to catch. Ruiz's eyebrows rose slightly before he nodded and accepted it. "This is for you," Ruiz said, turning to Marcus. Marcus took the envelope. its weight and stiffness telling him it wasn't just a letter. There were documents inside. He broke the seal with his thumb, sliding the papers halfway out. His eyes moved over the first page, and something in his expression shifted. Not shock, not anger, but the deep stillness of a man who had just confirmed a suspicion he'd been holding back since the call from his children. He didn't speak right away. He read, slowly, deliberately. The crowd stayed hushed, sensing the weight of whatever was in his hands. Ethan's voice came quietly from beside him. "Dad?" Marcus glanced at his son, then back at the page. "We'll talk in a moment," he said softly, without looking away from the document. And then, with the same care he'd used to open it, he slid the rest of the pages free and began turning them one by one, his eyes narrowing in a way that suggested he was seeing not just words, but the threads tying them together. Marcus stopped on the fourth page, his thumb holding the paper in place. Whatever was written there drew the faintest crease across his forehead. Without looking up, he said, "Mr. Ruiz, how long have you had this in your files?" The truth was already written. The airline just hoped no one would read it. Marcus held the fourth page of the packet steady with his thumb, eyes moving like a scanner across lines that were both dry and damning. The paper didn't shout. It didn't need to. It did what all bureaucratic documents do when they're honest by accident. It told on everyone. "How long has this been in your files?" he asked softly, not looking up. Ruiz kept his voice level. "Parts of it for months," he said. "This consolidated version, 2 weeks." A hum rippled through the crowd, the sound of 100 strangers translating months into "you knew." Keen's face lost another shade of color. Barnes's fingers hovered above her keyboard, as if letters might save her if only she found the right ones. Marcus turned the page so the light hit it flat. The heading was clinical. Customer Relations, Gate C14 Incidents. Past 18 months. Summary extract. Beneath it, bullet points and case numbers stacked like fence posts. Complaint after complaint, each with a terse précis. He read aloud, not to perform, but to place the words where they belonged, in the air, in the record, beyond denial. Case 14-31. Passenger. Black male denied first-class boarding as UMNR. Reassigned to coach despite paid fare. Staff cited premium cabin expectation. Resolution. Coaching provided. He flipped a page. Case 14-44-5. Passenger black family of 3. Told to split seating. Parents in coach. Child in first class to reduce disruption. Resolution. Customer accommodated with vouchers. Another page. Case 14-5502. Passenger black woman. Frequent flyer platinum. Questioned about ticket fraud at gate. Cleared missed upgrade window. Resolution. No fault determined goodwill miles offered. He paused. The next line had a name attached. Filed by Judge A. Rollins, Ret. A low whistle threaded the crowd. Somebody whispered. "A judge." Ruiz's pen moved. Alana Pierce, already taking notes, leaned forward just enough to see the page edge. "May I?" Marcus angled the packet a degree in her direction, without surrendering it. Alana's eyes flicked across the language. Familiar, coded, the phrasing of systems trying to sound neutral, while their choices weren't. Maya stood slightly behind her father's elbow, close enough to see a few words. Consistent cabin environment. Expectations of our premium clientele. Coaching completed. She didn't know the acronyms, but she understood the shape of the sentences. They were the adult version of the notes she'd heard at school, when a teacher said a dress was distracting, and somehow the girl was the problem, not the discomfort the room carried toward her body. She reached for Ethan's sleeve. His arm was already tense. Ethan watched his father and felt a strange overlap. The man reading those pages was the same dad who had taught him how to tie a tie, how to grill a burger, how to pick a safe seat on a bus. And he was also someone larger, someone who spoke a dialect of power that made men like Keen blink. Marcus turned another page. A table spanned it. Dates, gate numbers, initials. At the top, gate team cross-reference. He traced a column with his finger. The initials repeated. SB, TM, SK. Barnes, Miller, Keen. The pattern wasn't subtle, it was a drumbeat. He exhaled through his nose. Just once. "Systemic," he said, the word a diagnosis rather than a flourish. "Not an isolated incident, a habit with paperwork." Keen opened his mouth. "Those are anonymized." "Not enough," Marcus replied. "Still even. Not for anyone reading in good faith." Alana cleared her throat. "For the record," she said, This chart mirrors the preliminary heat map we generated during the audit period. We flagged this gate team for a variance in outcomes tied to discretionary decisions. We requested targeted training 6 weeks ago. She didn't add the next sentence, that the request had been logged, acknowledged, and then quietly placed in the pile of someday. She didn't need to. The PR manager 3 doors down felt it thud through a wall she couldn't see. Ruiz shifted closer to read the next section. It was a block of internal email headers, scrubbed of addresses, but not of tone. Marcus skimmed and selected one. Subject, Premium Optics, at C14, he read. From, S. Keen. Team, remember our commitment to consistency in the premium cabin. Use judgment to avoid optics that might upset high-value clients. Coordinate with customer relations if necessary. You could hear the word optics like a slur when it's wielded as a leash. Keen flinched as if someone else had said it. He had in black and white. Barnes shot him a look that was part plea, part accusation. You told us to. He didn't meet her eyes. Power rarely looks back when it's losing its reflection. Marcus flipped again. This time he stopped on a page with a name that tugged at memory. He read it, paused, then read it again out loud. Filed by Capta Ul-R Halbrook. Observed uneven application of UM-UNR. Boarding discretion, favoring white minor on flight YT7 inbound. Flagged concern to gate supervisor. Resolution, coaching provided, no further action required. The captain had been standing just inside the jet bridge, listening. He closed the distance now, face carved into something beyond professional disappointment. That report was mine, he said to Ruiz. I logged it with dispatch, and with the supervisor. I was told it would be handled internally. Internally, Marcus repeated quietly, as if testing the weight of the word. Where truth goes to be comfortable. A woman in the crowd, the one with the crimson scarf, shook her head. They put it in a drawer. Kayla in PR, reading the same file on her monitor, felt the drawer slam across her own life. She wasn't in the concourse, but she could predict the scene like a script she'd watched 100 times. She closed her eyes and saw a training calendar that had been postponed for operational needs. She opened them and typed to her boss, "We cannot call this isolated." Her boss replied with a ... that never resolved. Marcus turned another page. An internal note from 4 months earlier. From risk and compliance to operations. Flag pattern variance gate C14. Recommend external trainer budget approval pending. Beneath it, an inline reply from ops. Let's revisit Q4. The date stamp was 2 quarters ago. Ethan felt heat climb his neck. He wasn't angry the way cartoons draw anger. Red and loud. He was angry the way ice forms on a windshield. Slowly, covering everything you need to see with something you didn't ask for. He thought of the moment the agent had torn their tickets. He thought of how small Maya had tried to make herself. He thought of the word consistency. Dad, he said quietly, they plan to keep it this way. Marcus tilted his head the barest degree. Yes. The unexpected twist came tucked near the back of the packet, in handwriting rather than print. A photocopy of a sticky note, the edges dark from the copier's lamp, in block letters. Avoid UM&R in FC when possible. Optics. Initials. SK. A date 3 months old. Marcus didn't look at Keen. He looked at Ruiz. Do you see it? I see it, Ruiz said. His pen stopped moving. Sometimes a line doesn't need more ink. It needs action. Keen tried to recover his footing by reaching for a familiar cliff. Context matters, he said weakly. Those notes were reminders to ensure a calm cabin. Alana didn't raise her voice. If calm means homogeneous, say that, and let's litigate that sentence in daylight. Barnes's mouth tightened. We get screamed at for everything. We try to keep the people who paid happy. Maya, who had been quiet, finally found words that were as simple as they were unstoppable. We paid. The sentence landed with the accuracy of a thrown needle. Barnes looked away. Not out of shame exactly. Not yet. But out of the first recognition that the story she told herself at the counter didn't survive outside of it. Marcus turned the last page. At the bottom, stapled was a thin printout. Social listening, escalation risk. It aggregated mentions of the airline over the past quarter tied to the words bias, race, discrimination policy. Next to it, a tiny spark line trending upward. Someone in corporate had seen this coming as a matter of trend lines and sentiment curves. No one had stepped on the brake. He slid the packet back into the envelope. Movements unhurried. He wasn't savoring the moment. He was honoring the gravity. Mr. Ruiz, he said, you have enough to act. Ruiz nodded once. We will. There was no bluster in it. Just the clipped finality of someone who knows his jurisdiction and intends to use it. He turned to Keene. You're relieved of duty pending formal review. Agent Barnes, Agent Miller, you will provide written statements now and then. Step away from the gate. Customer relations will manage this desk until further notice. A murmur ran like a current. It wasn't triumph. It was the body's involuntary sound when a pressure valve finally sighs. Keene groped for a last lever. You can. I can, Ruiz said gently. And I am. He looked to the woman from customer relations, who had been watching the floor as if hoping it would teach her something. Miss Davenport, print the replacement first-class boarding passes as soon as the hold lifts. Then compose a written apology addressed to Mr. Carter and his children, not to the family, and include language acknowledging the pattern we've just documented. She nodded. Something in her face complicated, a mixture of humiliation and a small cool relief at being told to do the right thing by someone who outranked her fear. Marcus shifted his attention to his children, briefly. You two good? Ethan nodded. Maya swallowed. Can we go home soon? Soon, Marcus said. He touched the edge of her sleeve, the smallest fatherly gesture, a reset in a room full of resets. The boy in the hoodie whispered to his stream. Chat. The supervisor's out. Comments cascaded. Accountability. Name names. Make it policy-proof. Across the concourse, the TV reporter checked her earpiece. We can go live in 60, the producer mouthed. She shook her head. Not yet, she mouthed back. Eyes on Marcus. Let the dad finish. Kayla in PR typed a new sentence into the draft. We are removing staff from duty pending investigation. For the first time all day, she didn't feel like she was inventing synonyms for air. Marcus exhaled once more and reached inside his coat, not for the envelope he'd just read, but for his own. It wasn't a metaphorical one. It was real. A slim, black folio that he'd carried for years. He opened it on the counter with the same care he'd used with the FAA packet, revealing tabs labeled with crisp, handwritten titles. Contracts of carriage, tariffs, correspondence, logs, evidence. He slid one tab divider aside and drew out a printed email chain. The one from 4 months ago, his letter to West Sky's risk office warning of bias at the gate level. The polite acknowledgement, the slow fade to administrative silence. He laid it beside Ruiz's envelope. He took out a memory stick too, a small brushed metal thing with a label in his neat block print. Gate C14. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look at the phones. He looked at Ruiz, then at Alana, then at the captain. You need to see my evidence too. A single incident can be dismissed. A pattern becomes undeniable. Marcus didn't rush as he placed the items on the counter, one after the other. The printed email chain, the memory stick, a neatly folded sheet of lined paper with handwriting so precise it looked typed. Dates, times, flight numbers, initials, his personal log. Ruiz's eyes followed each piece as if Marcus were laying down cards in a game where the stakes had just shifted from money to survival. The crowd leaned in too, but not for the drama. They sensed the shape of what was happening. This wasn't just a father defending his kids anymore. It was the moment a story became a case. These, Marcus said evenly, tapping the first page, are my letters to West Sky's Risk and Compliance Office from 4 months ago. Warning of biased gate-level discretion. These, he touched the second pile, are their acknowledgements. These, his fingers shifted to the log sheet, are my independent records of incidents reported by other passengers who contacted me after hearing my safety panel remarks last year. Alana glanced up sharply at that. You've been collecting outside cases? Marcus met her gaze. When you speak in public about systemic issues, people find you. They tell you their stories. I told them to document and keep receipts. Many did. I matched those stories against public flight logs. Several point to this same gate team. The taller federal transport official, Torres, opened a slim laptop from his bag, booted it on the counter, and slid the memory stick into the port. We'll image this for the record, he said. Ruiz took the email chain and began scanning. His pen came out again, but this time it wasn't for short notes. It was to mark specific lines, box them in, and add arrows to the margin. This, he said, is contemporaneous notice to the carrier. It establishes prior awareness. Alana's brows lifted. And failure to mitigate. Marcus didn't smile. Exactly. The smaller of the two officials with Marcus leaned toward Ruiz. We can invoke 14 CFR Part 259 for failure to adhere to stated non-discrimination policies in contract of carriage. Coupled with documented pattern, this meets threshold. Ethan didn't follow the legal jargon, but he understood the posture change in the officials. It was like watching someone move from listening to deciding. Ruiz closed the email set and nodded once. We're opening a formal review. Effective now. Keen shifted in place. What does that mean? It means, Ruiz said, still calm, your conduct, your team's conduct, and your gate's historical data will be under investigation by the FAA in coordination with DOT oversight. Barnes blinked, then looked down at her keyboard like it might shield her. Miller kept his headset on but stopped pretending to listen to anyone. Marcus gestured toward the envelope. Ruiz had brought him earlier. And with what you already had in your files, that review will have teeth. Ruiz looked at Torres. Log the chain of custody for all items. Get duplicates made now. Torres typed, his fingers quick but precise, labeling each file in a way that would survive both court and committee. Unexpectedly, the captain stepped forward again. For what it's worth, Halbrook said, I'll provide my own logs. I've seen enough over the years to know when something's not random. I filed one complaint already. This one won't disappear in an inbox. Ruiz gave a small, appreciative nod. Your testimony will be included. In the communications room, Kayla's Slack exploded. FAA launching review at C-14. She stared at the words, her headache now a full drumbeat. There was no holding statement that could make this disappear now. She typed to legal, we need to prepare for discovery requests. Legal replied with a single emoji, not one of levity, but a warning. At the gate, the boy in the hoodie whispered into his phone. Chat, I think they're pulling people off the job right now. The live comment feed spiked. Do it. Name and shame. Accountability in real time. Ruiz turned to Keen. Supervisor, until further notice, you are relieved of duty. It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. The words landed with the weight of authority that doesn't seek permission. Keen froze, like his brain needed a moment to process that this was not a suggestion.
You can't just.
I can, Ruiz said, in the same tone he'd used to confirm a boarding time. And I just did. Barnes looked up, startled, as Ruiz's gaze shifted to her. Agent Barnes, you will also step aside and provide a written statement before leaving this post. Agent Miller, the same applies to you. The crowd didn't cheer. This wasn't a sports win. It was quieter, heavier, the kind of moment where strangers exhaled together, like a storm had just shifted direction. Maya glanced at her father, her voice small but steady. Does that mean they can't hurt anyone else today? Marcus crouched slightly so his eyes were level with hers. It means the people who made those choices won't be making them, while this is being investigated. She nodded, not smiling, but letting her shoulders drop a fraction.
The customer relations manager, Davenport, stepped into the space Barnes vacated, her face pale but set. Mr. Carter, as soon as the hold lifts, I'll issue your replacement passes for 2A and 2B. You have my word they will be on the printer first.
Marcus inclined his head. Thank you. Make sure the apology is on paper too. Davenport hesitated. It will be. Torres slid the memory stick back toward Marcus, after imaging it. Original's yours. Copies are secure. Ruiz gathered the forms, the logs, the envelope, stacking them in a way that spoke of both order and finality. This isn't over, he said, not as a threat but as a truth. But the first domino has fallen. As Barnes stepped away from the counter, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, froze, then shot a look toward Keen, one that wasn't fear, but warning. Whatever message she'd just read, it wasn't over for her either. Airports run on schedules, but outrage runs on fuel no plane can carry. By the time the hold on Concourse C began to unwind in careful phases, the story had already slipped from one terminal to the next, from phones to feeds to newsrooms that could smell a narrative with teeth. A local affiliate cut into midday programming, with B-roll of gleaming fuselages, and the banner FAA review after children denied first class. Within an hour, a national morning show replayed the denim jacket influencer's clip, slowed down just enough to catch the moment the gate agent's jaw tightened, before tearing paper. The Chiron didn't editorialize. It didn't need to. The footage did its own work. In living rooms and break rooms, on subway platforms and in school cafeterias, the clip ran again and again. The sound of thin paper ripping across the country like a zipper closing on something people had hoped was no longer there. Commentators tried for balance and landed instead on a geometry of facts, tickets, policy, race, discretion. The words premium cabin consistency made an appearance, and even the anchors flinched, as if the phrase turned their own mouths foreign. At gate C14, Marcus kept his children close without crowding them, his palm hovering near Maya's shoulder like a promise. Ruiz and the transport officials worked the next steps with the calm of technicians in a thunderstorm. Davenport printed forms for statement. Agents rotated through to cover the desk while Barnes and Miller were escorted to a back room, not in handcuffs, not shamed, but removed. The gentle administrative hush that follows when a line has finally been named. Outside the glass, pushback tugs resumed their choreography in slow motion. Engines spooled back to life, but the hum felt different now, as if every turbine had learned a new note. The first wave of public stories arrived like aftershocks. A father in Seattle posted a photo of a crumpled paper napkin with a handwritten seat reassignment. His daughter moved to coach after a policy review he'd never been shown. A grandmother in Dallas wrote a thread about being told to wait to the side at the business class lane while 3 white travelers were waved through with a smile. A teacher in Newark described a group of students returning from a debate tournament. Tickets scanned and then rescinded at the counter when the agent noticed they were unaccompanied. Each post ended with some version of the same sentence. I didn't push because I was tired. I wish I had. The hashtag Gone First Class while black swelled into the top 3 trends by afternoon. Not because a brand had engineered it, but because the internet recognized what the airport had tried to misname. That policy was being used as a mask. Under it, sub-threads bloomed. In policy or prejudice, show the rule, let them fly. A law professor stitched together a thread of case law in plain English. A union organizer posted a video aimed not at passengers but at frontline staff. When your company asks you to enforce a feeling, it's not policy, it's risk. Kayla, the PR manager, watched the mentions counter turn into a waterfall. She'd rewritten the holding statement 3 times, each iteration losing a syllable of defensiveness and gaining half a sentence of humility. It didn't matter. The momentum out there wasn't waiting for her prose to achieve grace. She was still in the building, but her day felt like trying to stop a river with a paper cup. She typed a note to her boss, recommend we own the pattern. Anything short will look like lying. The reply came quick. Legal says no admission of systemic issues until we know exposure. Exposure had a way of arriving uninvited. At 2:16 p.m., an anonymous account posted 3 screenshots of an internal chat log from a West Skygate best practices group. The messages were banal in places: shift swaps, printer jams, coffee recommendations, and then not banal at all. One bubble read, UMNDAR and FC can be tricky optics. Use judgment. Keep the cabin calm. Another, if in doubt reassign and apologize later is safer. Under the gray username, the initials matched those in the complaint file. The post didn't say racism. It didn't have to. Read alongside the video of torn tickets. The phrase reassign and apologize later sounded less like prudence and more like a quiet, practiced muscle. Look, the boy in the hoodie breathed to his stream, pinching the screen to zoom. They're leaking their own chats. The comment column exploded, not in glee but in the cathartic fury of recognition. This isn't a one-off. They built this. Apologize later is the policy. In the concourse, Davenport's shoulders sagged when the alert popped on her own phone. She swallowed and looked toward Marcus, then toward Ruiz, who had already received the same screenshots via a different channel. Torres took photos of the images on a second device, adding them to the growing chain of custody. No one celebrated. Proof had a way of feeling like grief when it confirmed what people hoped wasn't true. Ethan and Maya were no longer the only story. They were the keystone, the human faces you could follow through a maze of memos and euphemisms. Passengers approached and offered quiet words that felt more substantial than most corporate statements. A woman in a pressed suit said, I fly out of here twice a week. I've seen the sideways looks. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner. A man with a baby strapped to his chest whispered, my son will be your age someday. Thank you for not moving. Not every approach was generous. A man in a polo with a country club logo shook his head as he passed and muttered, this is why planes are late. He didn't stop. He didn't look back. He left the sentence like litter. Maya flinched. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he only did what his father had taught him. He watched the words go and refused to carry them. Marcus noticed anyway. He angled his body an inch to give his children more cover from eyes that didn't know how to be kind. He didn't turn it into a teachable moment. He'd done enough teaching today. He let the presence do what presence does best. Say I'm here without requiring anyone to applaud it. Not long after the leak, a private number called Marcus's second phone. He didn't recognize it, but he recognized the cadence of the man who spoke. Mr. Carter, I'm counsel for Westguy. I'd like to discuss a private resolution. Marcus stepped half a pace away from the counter. I'm listening. We can issue an immediate apology, restore the seats, and provide a significant settlement for your family. The man said crisply, the kind of voice that brokers quiet in expensive rooms. We would ask in turn for a mutual non-disparagement agreement, and confidentiality regarding the particulars. We can also make a contribution to a charity of your choosing. No NDA, Marcus said. No confidentiality. A pause. I'm sure you understand our need to limit reputational damage. I understand your need, Marcus replied. I don't share it. We can be very generous, Mr. Carter. My children aren't a PR expense, Marcus said. And this isn't just about them. Your airline has a pattern. If you want to be generous, write a policy and show your training calendar. Make the apology public. Include the words we ignored warnings. Put it in the app, on the website, and on those little screens above the gate that loop the safety video. Then we can talk about what a meaningful settlement looks like. Silence stretched, then broke. That's not how these things are normally handled, counsel said. That's the point, Marcus said, and ended the call. He slipped the phone back into his coat and glanced toward Ruiz, who had watched the cadence of the conversation without eavesdropping on the content. Ruiz didn't ask. He didn't need to. He could tell by the set of Marcus's shoulders what the answer had been. In the back offices, Kayla received a different kind of call. One from a junior comms staffer who'd been with the company 9 months. I can't stay if we're going to lie, the young woman said, voice shaking. If we post that this was an isolated incident, I'm done. Kayla closed her eyes and felt the choice settle like a stone. I won't write a lie, she said, surprising herself with the simplicity of the sentence. If they post one, it won't be mine. She hung up, turned to legal on the group call, and said, we need to take the heat. Anything else is kerosene. Legal asked, are you tendering your resignation? Not unless you make me, Kayla said. I'd rather fix it. Back on the concourse, restoration finally began to look like movement. The hold light on the podium printer blinked from red to green. Davenport slid 2 white rectangles into the tray, the paper edges clean as promise. 2A and 2B printed in crisp sans serif, like they'd always been there. She didn't smile when she handed them over. She looked like someone trying to rebuild a wooden bridge one plank at a time, while the river still ran fast. Mr. Carter, she said softly, these are yours, and there's an apology letter. It's not enough, but it's not nothing. Marcus took the tickets and the letter. He didn't perform forgiveness. He didn't weaponize contempt. Thank you, he said. We'll read it. Maya looked at the tickets like they were foreign, like someone had replaced her childhood with cardstock. Can we sit together? She asked. Because some questions are how a child asks for the world to make sense again. Yes, Ethan said quietly, tapping 2A and 2B with the back of a knuckle. Always. Passengers clapped. Not as a celebration of the airline, but as a send-off for 2 kids who had done an adult's job in public. The sound wasn't triumph. It was a benediction. Unexpectedly, an athlete with 1 million followers, a track star flying home from a meet, stepped into view near the stanchions and quietly asked if he could walk the siblings down the jet bridge when it was time. He didn't want a photo. He wanted them to feel the weight shift around them in the direction of protection for once. Marcus thanked him and said, we'll hold the rail together. The jet bridge agent gave a thumbs up. A flight attendant peeked up the tunnel and said to Ethan and Maya, voice low and fierce in a way that made kindness sound like armor, we've got you in the cabin. Somewhere beyond C-14, another West Sky station manager watched the feed and sent a text to her team. From now on, if you say policy, you better have a page number. And if you see a kid get small, you stop what you're doing and ask why. It wasn't an official directive. It would carry further than one. Kayla finally pushed a new statement to the airline's channels. It was shorter than the earlier drafts, and it did something rare. It named the pattern. We failed. Not just today. We ignored warnings and allowed discretion to harm the very people we should protect. We are cooperating with Federal Review and will publish our corrective actions with dates and names. To Ethan and Maya Carter, we are sorry. The comments were skeptical, Some were cruel, but threaded through were responses that sounded almost like the airport sounded right now. Cautious, unwilling to be fooled, stubborn about dignity. Ethan's phone buzzed with a message from a classmate he barely knew. Saw you on TV. You looked brave. If you want, I'll sit with you at lunch next week. He didn't know what to do with that, so he did nothing, which was also an answer for now. Marcus checked the time. Flights had resumed. The window glass shimmered with heat mirages where engines exhaled. He turned to Ruiz. Are we cleared to board? Ruiz nodded. Yes, I'll walk you to the door. They shifted forward, as a group: father, children, pilot, investigator, federal officials. They weren't a parade, they were something quieter and more durable. A line of people who had refused to look away long enough for the shape of a truth to become visible. Just as they reached the stanchions, Marcus's phone vibrated with a call that cut through the noise like a hand on a bell. The number was blocked. The ID didn't say unknown. It said Capital Switchboard. He answered, because age and experience had taught him two things: that most calls don't matter, and that sometimes the ones that do arrive without warning. Mr. Carter, the voice was measured, trained, almost soothing. This is Senator Elaine Whitcomb. I've been following what's happening at your gate. Do you have a minute? Marcus looked at his children, at the jet bridge yawning open like a mouth, at the faces waiting for them to step through, then lifted the phone to his ear, as the concourse held its breath. Some meetings aren't about business. They're about history. Marcus kept his voice low at the jet bridge threshold, the Capitol switchboard hum in his ear cutting through the terminal noise. Senator Whitcomb, he said, glancing at Ethan and Maya, I have 2 children to put on a plane. Make this brief or make it count. It'll count, the senator replied. Yodi is already looped. Your FAA gentleman confirms the facts. West Sky's executive team is in a crisis room, and they're stalling. If you're willing, we put you in the room now. Virtual, recorded, independent note taker, my staff present. You speak, they listen. Marcus looked to Ruiz. The FAA official nodded once, already reading his mind. We can borrow an operations conference room on the mezzanine, Ruiz said. 10 minutes. Marcus knelt to his kids. You board when Captain Halbrook calls you. You stay together. First row left side. I'll meet you on the other end, even if I have to run. Maya swallowed. You promise? I don't miss landings, he said, and kissed her hairline. Ethan squeezed his hand, a quick clasp that said do what you do. They watched their father follow Ruiz and the DOT officials up a service stairwell. The concourse murmurs softened behind them, replaced by the antiseptic hum of an airport hallway that smelled faintly of copier toner and old coffee. The ops conference room was all glass and quiet. A screen on one wall and a city map on the other. Ruiz shut the door, checked the recording indicator, and keyed the line. You're live, he said. The screen blinked, then populated with faces and boxes. A gray-templed man, in an open-collar suit at the head of a gleaming table. Avery Lang, CEO, West Sky. Beside him, a woman in tortoiseshell glasses, with legal pads stacked like fortifications. General Counsel Marin. A cautious-looking COO, and off to one side, PR manager Kayla, shoulders tight, eyes tired. Another tile held Senator Whitcomb and a staff counsel. A third showed DOT civil rights. Lang leaned toward the camera, the performative warmth of a practiced executive barely hiding the strain around his eyes. Mr. Carter, thank you. This is being recorded, Marcus said evenly. Time-stamped. I'm here with FAA and DOT present. Proceed with that understanding. Lang's smile thinned. Of course. Our primary concern is your children's safety and comfort. Save the softeners, Marcus replied. They're safe. We're here for accountability. Marin, legal, interlaced her fingers. We regret today's incident, and are conducting an internal— Stop, Marcus said softly. An incident is a one-off. Ruiz handed me your internal summaries. We both know better. A beat. Lang exhaled. Then let's talk solutions. Good, Marcus said. He pulled the FAA envelope into frame, then his own folio. You've had notice for months. Complaints cite the same gate team, the same euphemisms, the same outcomes. Your remedy so far? Coaching and vouchers. That pattern ends today. Whitcomb lifted a hand, not to interrupt, but to bless the momentum. Mr. Lang, given today's FAA actions, I would advise you to engage constructively. My office is drafting inquiries. Cooperation will be noted. Kayla's square flickered. hesitation crossing her face like a shadow of decency. She unmuted. Mr. Carter, I'm Kayla from Communications. For what it's worth, I pushed for a statement that admits the pattern. Good, Marcus said, not unkind. Then you'll have no trouble pushing for what comes next. He laid out the architecture with the precision of a structural engineer. First, a public apology, not a tweet. An unambiguous statement posted on your homepage, in your app, and at every gate screen for 72 hours. It must acknowledge prior warnings and the pattern of discretionary bias, not merely inconvenience. Second, policy. You will publish in plain language your contract of carriage rules that apply to upgrades, UMNRs and premium cabins, and gate discretion. Sunlight prevents selective application. Third, training. Not a webinar. Independent, in-person, evidence-based anti-bias and human factors training for all customer-facing staff, with refreshers every 6 months, and public reporting of completion rates by station. Curriculum and vendor disclosed. Fourth, transparency. A quarterly dashboard disclosing complaints by category and outcome, including gate-level data, anonymized as necessary but specific enough to reveal patterns. Fifth, accountability. A dedicated civil rights ombuds with termination authority over any station leadership that ignores documented bias. Reporting line goes outside operations. It goes to the board. Kayla sat very still. Marin began to speak, but Lang lifted a palm, not silencing her, but asking for room to think. The COO scribbled silently. Jaw said. Marin tried the tightrope. We'll need to consider privacy concerns on gate-level data. Potential defamation exposure. Then consider it faster, Whitcomb said. You may prefer shareholder discomfort to committee hearings. I know which I'd choose. Torres, the transport official, slid a paper toward the camera, a simple grid with dates. FAA can coordinate with DOT to reference best practices from consent orders. You can reinvent the wheel, or borrow one that rolls. Lang looked older in that moment, as if the air itself had added weight. He steepled his fingers and studied the table, then the camera. Mr. Carter, he said, voice flatter now. What do you want for your family? Specifically, my children will get on a plane today, Marcus said. They will sit in the seats you sold them. They will receive an apology addressed to them by name. But this is bigger than us. If you make this about a check with our last name on it, you will teach your company the wrong lesson. Marin shifted, exhaling through her nose. Our insurers, Lang cut in, tone warning. He had read the room. The old playbook was tinder. We can do the apology and policy visibility. Training we already claim we do. We can make it real. The dashboard, legal, limited, Marin said. Aggregate only.
Gate level, Marcus said.
Or you will simply bury the places where it hurts. Kayla spoke before legal could. Gate level with ranges, perhaps? Color-coded variance markers. If a station spikes, everyone will know without outing individuals. Her voice was careful, but there was something like hope in it. The kind of hope that tries on courage and finds that it fits. Workable. DOT Civil Rights said from their tile. We've seen similar dashboards drive actual change. Marin pinched the bridge of her nose. We will not identify employees. Nor did I ask you to, Marcus said. Systems, not scapegoats. Start with leadership. Silence pooled. Not uncomfortable now. Just the quiet of a decision taking shape in public. Lang finally leaned closer. We agree, he said, each word measured like a landing. Apology, policy publication, independent training with reporting, quarterly transparency with station-level variance, and an ombuds reporting to the board. We'll announce within 24 hours. 6. Marcus said. By 6 p.m. Eastern, a time-stamped statement live on your properties and physical signage for gates. People shouldn't hear about their dignity in the morning news cycle tomorrow. They should see it before dinner. Lang's jaw ticked, the cost of speed penciling itself in his mind. 6, he said. Fine. Good, Whitcomb said. I'll note your prompt action in my letter to the committee. The COO unmuted at last. Operationally, we'll need a training vendor. Mr. Carter, you referenced one in prior correspondence. I did, Marcus said, sliding a sheet under the camera. A program built with former flight attendants, gate agents, and human factor specialists. It doesn't shame, it rewires. You will pay for it. You will also pay staff for their time to attend, not ask them to do this on their weekend. Agreed, Lang said. Marin looked like a person calculating deductibles against existential risk. We will require a release from your family for the specific claims. No NDAs, Marcus said. No gag orders. If you need a release to cut a check for our inconvenience today, it will not include my silence about what happened to anyone else. You want the old way? Find a different father. Kayla's eyes flicked briefly, almost involuntarily, toward the lower bar of her screen, where a draft statement waited. We failed. She had written it. For the first time in hours, she believed it might be posted without being neutered. Unexpectedly, a new box appeared on the screen. Unlabeled, a board member joining late. The camera stabilized on a woman in her 70s, with a silver bob and the expression of someone who had given money to too many institutions that learned nothing from it. Chair board glowed under her name. I've heard enough to make a board resolution, she said. Mr. Lang, implement these measures. Miss Marin, draft language that errs on the side of contrition. Mr. Carter, on behalf of this board, I am sorry. We let culture harden around bad habits and called it policy. Marcus watched her face. He wasn't looking for absolution. He was measuring sincerity. It did not feel like theater. Thank you, Madam Chair, he said quietly. Make it public. It will be, she said. And for what it's worth, the last time I ignored a pattern like this, it was in a different industry. I resigned. I'd rather not repeat the lesson. Lang cleared his throat, the tiniest edge of humility breaking through habit. Mr. Carter, is there anything else you require today to ensure your children travel with dignity? Seatbelts and a safe landing, Marcus said, and a message delivered to them that doesn't sound like it was drafted for your lawyers. Kayla unmuted. I'll write it, she said. Plain language. Signed by the CEO. By you both, Marcus said, nodding toward the board chair. Dignity should never arrive alone. Whitcomb's staff counsel slipped a note to the senator, who read it and lifted her gaze. One more thing, she said. Mr. Carter, my office is preparing a passenger civil rights transparency bill. When the hearings come, I hope you'll testify. That's for another day, Marcus said. Right now I have a gate to get back to. He rose, the chair's breath audible in the ceiling mic, as if even the building exhaled. Lang spoke quickly as if to catch him before the door closed. Mr. Carter, he said, I agree to your demands. All of them. He hesitated, a visible calculation of pride versus survival. And let pride lose. You were right to force our hand. Marcus paused at the door. I wasn't trying to force your hand, he said. I was trying to open it. He reached for the handle. Behind him, the board chair leaned closer to her camera. Before you go, she said, I want to say to Ethan and Maya, through you, we will do better. You have my word. Marcus's mouth tightened in something that wasn't a smile but wasn't its opposite. Give them more than your word, he said. Give them Lang nodded, as if nodding could be a down payment. You'll have it by 6. Marcus opened the door. Ruiz was waiting with the hallway already cleared. The senator's tile flickered as she signed off. The DOT tile blinked and disappeared. The screen returned to a reflection of the empty room. Chairs pushed in. A ring of condensation under a forgotten glass. A set already struck. They were halfway down the hall, when Kayla's voice reached him from the open laptop speaker he'd left behind.
Mr. Lang?
She said, we should add a commitment to publish a public reporting email, where frontline staff can safely send concerns. Anonymous. Routed to the ombuds. Do it, Lang said, and send the draft to me in the chair within the hour. Marin started to object, then closed her mouth. Change, like takeoff, requires a point of no return. They had reached it. Marcus took the stairs 2 at a time, the rhythm of his feet echoing off cinderblock, the rest of his life's habits falling in behind the day's new terms. He glanced at his watch. If he moved, he could catch the boarding door before it closed. He could keep his promise. At the base of the stairwell, Ruiz matched his stride. That was definitive, the FAA official said. It was necessary, Marcus replied. Definitive comes later. They emerged into the concourse. Gate C14 looked different. Not because the carpet had changed, but because the people had. The crowd had thinned to travelers actually trying to make it somewhere. Davenport stood a little taller. The jet bridge gaped. The line was short. Ethan and Maya were at the front. Boarding passes pressed flat between their fingers like they'd learned to hold paper with respect. Ready? Marcus asked them. Maya nodded. Ethan exhaled. More than ready. Captain Halbrook stood at the door, hand on the frame like a man guarding a threshold. He looked at Marcus as if the two had just finished moving a heavy couch up a narrow staircase. "Cabin's yours," he said. Marcus turned as if to join them, then stopped, remembering the one thing that still sat unspoken in his chest. He looked back toward the ops hallway. The airline had capitulated. The board had acquiesced. The senator had promised hearings. The internet had done its part. But history doesn't move on apologies alone. It moves on terms. He pivoted, catching Davenport's eye. "Get your CEO back on the line," he said. "Tell him I have one more condition." Davenport pressed the call button with shaking fingers as Marcus lifted his phone, and the entire gate seemed to lean forward, waiting to hear what price he would set on the future. Justice isn't revenge. It's rewriting the rules. The call to Lang connected before the first ring ended. Marcus didn't pace, didn't posture. He stood at the gate with the jet bridge door still open. The hum of the plane's auxiliary power a steady undertone to his words. "One more condition," Marcus said, voice even. "This can't just be your airline's fix. I want your public commitment to push the FAA for an industry-wide standard on discretionary passenger treatment, with language that makes bias measurable and punishable. No hiding behind vague cabin environment excuses. You lead the charge, or I make sure you follow someone else's." There was a pause. The faint rustle of someone covering a phone speaker to whisper in a boardroom. Lang came back, voice lower now. "If we lead, you'll work with us." "I'll work with anyone who's serious," Marcus said. "But I won't work for you. This isn't PR, this is prevention." Lang hesitated, then agreed. "I'll put it in writing tonight." "Do it," Marcus said, ending the call. By the time Ethan and Maya's flight landed 3 hours later, Westsky's press page carried a statement so direct it startled even its harshest critics. It named bias as a systemic risk, acknowledged prior warnings, and laid out timelines for reforms with the kind of specificity that leaves little room for retreat. Alongside it was a one-paragraph announcement. Effective immediately, Westsky Airlines will introduce the nation's first passenger equity standard, banning undefined comfort and consistency justifications for seat reassignments. The airline will advocate for the Federal Aviation Administration to adopt this standard across all U.S. carriers. That night, FAA's official X account reposted the statement with its own addendum. "We are reviewing this proposal as part of a broader passenger rights update. Interim guidance will be sent to all carriers tomorrow." It was more than a repost. It was a signal flare. By morning, the FAA memo was in every operations inbox from Boston to Honolulu. The language was terse but unmissable. Effective immediately, discretionary seating or boarding decisions must cite a specific published policy. Terms such as cabin environment, passenger comfort, or similar subjectives are prohibited as sole justification. Failure to comply may result in fines or loss of gate authority. For gate agents accustomed to a wide gray area, the memo was a line in permanent ink. There was no room for "I just thought" anymore. In the weeks that followed, Westsky rolled out the first wave of its independent anti-discrimination training. It wasn't the usual 2-hour online module buried between safety refreshers. It was 3 days, in person, led by facilitators who had been gate agents, flight attendants, and passenger advocates. They didn't lecture, they role-played. They didn't shame, they showed, and they didn't let anyone leave without answering one question out loud. What would you have done at gates? Anonymous bias reporting went live. The same week, the email and hotline bypassed local management entirely, routing directly to the new civil rights ombuds, a former NTSB investigator known for asking uncomfortable questions until he got answers. Reports could be made from any Westsky device without leaving a trace in local logs. Posters with the hotline number went up in crew rooms, break areas, and most critically behind the counters themselves, facing the agents. A quiet reminder that someone was watching the watchers. Not everyone welcomed the change. A small but vocal cluster of employees muttered about overcorrection and second-guessing judgment calls. But the first time a report came in about a questionable reassignment and was handled within 48 hours, with the passenger offered a personal apology from station leadership, word spread that the ombuds wasn't a figurehead. The ripple went further. Other airlines, caught between public expectation and regulatory momentum, began quietly drafting their own versions of the passenger equity standard before FAA could make it mandatory. One low-cost carrier's internal memo leaked, admitting bluntly, "Better to set our own terms now than have them set for us later." Cable news kept the story alive longer than most corporate embarrassments. Not because Marcus sought the spotlight. He refused most interviews. But because Ethan and Maya's faces, captured in that first viral clip, had become shorthand for a question no airline could answer comfortably. Would this have happened to them if they looked different? In their neighborhood, strangers stopped Marcus on the sidewalk. Some just said thank you. Others told their own travel stories, like old wounds that had been waiting for someone to make them sound less like bad luck, and more like the patterns they were. For Ethan, the attention felt strange. Kids at school treated him differently, some with respect, some with distance. Maya started sketching during recess. Airplanes boarding gates, sometimes her father standing in front of a counter with the crowd blurred behind him. She didn't show anyone but Marcus. One Friday evening, a month after the incident, the three of them stood in the kitchen as the TV in the living room played a segment on the FAA's progress toward making the passenger equity standard law. Marcus listened without pretending to be casual. The anchor used words like landmark and precedent setting. A scroll at the bottom of the screen read, Senate hearings on passenger rights scheduled for early next year. When the segment ended, Maya put her pencil down. So it's over? She asked. Marcus shook his head slowly. No. It's starting. Ethan frowned. But they changed the rules. They changed a rule. Marcus said, rules don't enforce themselves. People do. And people forget. The only way this lasts is if someone's still watching 5 years from now. Maya thought about that. Will you still be watching? Yes, Marcus said. And maybe one day you will too. That night, as the kids went to bed, Marcus stood at the window, city lights blinking in the distance like runway beacons. He knew that for every public reform, there would be private pushback. For every headline, there would be a quiet reversal somewhere, a loophole someone thought they could slip through. The fight wasn't about catching every wrong. It was about making the wrong harder to do. His phone buzzed. A message from Whitcomb's staffer. Hearing date set. We'll need your statement. He typed back. Send me the docket. The system had shifted. Not enough. Never enough. But it had moved. The next morning, a West Sky training facilitator sent Marcus an email. Yesterday in Phoenix, a gate agent stopped boarding when a colleague tried to reassign 2 teens without cause. She cited the passenger equity standard and called a supervisor. The kids kept their seats. The note ended simply. They're out there, listening. Marcus closed the email, a faint smile on his lips. The message wasn't about winning. It was about planting something that could grow without him standing over it. Later that week, he took Ethan and Maya to the small aviation museum near the old airfield. They walked past the vintage posters, the mock cockpits, the display cases of stewardess uniforms from decades when the rules were written for a different kind of passenger. At the exit, a plaque caught Maya's eye. Flight is proof that what was once impossible can become everyday. She touched the glass. Like what you did, she said. No, Marcus replied. Like what we started. As they stepped outside into the late afternoon light, Marcus's phone rang again. The caller ID not a person, but 3 letters, DOT. He looked at his kids and said, this isn't over, this is just the start. This time, every passenger wanted them in first class. The jet bridge felt different now. No hush of humiliation. No sidelong glances meant to make them shrink. Ethan and Maya stepped into the tunnel side by side, the sound of their sneakers muted on the padded floor, the air warm with the faint scent of the plane's coffee brewing just ahead. Captain Halbrook stood in the doorway, hands still resting on the metal frame, but this time his smile was open and unguarded. Welcome aboard, Carter family, he said, voice carrying just enough to be heard by the passengers closest to the door. We've been waiting for you. The lead flight attendant, a woman named Simone, with eyes that caught light like polished brass, offered them each a handshake, not because protocol demanded it, but because dignity did. Seats 2A and 2B, she said, but you can sit anywhere you'd like up here. We're honored to have you. As they stepped into the cabin, the quiet murmur of conversation stilled for a moment. A wave of subtle applause began, not loud enough to feel performative, but warm enough to wrap around them like a blanket. Some passengers nodded, others gave small smiles, a few simply met their eyes, and held the look long enough to let the unspoken pass between them. We saw, we know. Maya kept close to Ethan, fingers brushing his arm. She could feel the difference in the air. No tension, no suspicion. And yet the memory of the gate lingered like a shadow that refused to fade in daylight. She glanced up at her brother, half expecting him to crack a joke, but his expression was thoughtful, scanning the rows ahead. They reached their seats, wide, waiting, a window view of the late afternoon tarmac. A flight attendant offered them drinks before takeoff. But Ethan shook his head politely. He was still looking past the divider into coach, where passengers were settling in. That's when he saw him. 3 rows back in economy. In the middle seat sat a boy who couldn't have been more than 9. He had close-cropped hair, a small backpack wedged under the seat in front of him, and an expression Marcus recognized instantly. The mix of curiosity and caution that comes from learning too early to take the temperature of a room before deciding how to sit in it. The boy's eyes flicked to Ethan's seat, then back to his lap. Not longing exactly. Just a quiet acknowledgement that some doors don't open the same way for everyone. Ethan leaned toward his sister. "Do you see him?" Maya followed his gaze. "Yeah." Without looking away from the boy, Ethan stood. He unbuckled the seatbelt he'd barely fastened and walked down the aisle toward coach. Passengers watched, puzzled but silent, as he stopped beside the middle seat. "Hey," Ethan said softly. "You want to sit up front?" The boy blinked. "Me?" "Yeah," Ethan said, smiling. "You." The boy's mother, seated on the aisle, looked up in surprise. "That's very kind. But it's okay," Ethan said, glancing at Simone, who was already at his shoulder. She gave a quick nod. The mother hesitated, then touched her son's arm. "Go on, Jamal." The boy gathered his backpack and stood, moving cautiously as if expecting someone to change their mind. Ethan led him forward, the cabin watching as the trade was made without fuss. He took the boy's middle seat in coach without hesitation, and Jamal slid into 2A, eyes wide as he looked at the touchscreen in front of him. Maya leaned over the aisle toward him. "Window's the best part," she whispered, pressing the button to let the shade rise. Jamal smiled for the first time. From his new seat, Ethan could see Marcus standing in the galley, one hand braced on the bulkhead, watching the exchange unfold. Marcus didn't interfere. He didn't need to. He understood exactly what his son had done. Turned a win into a seat. Simone crouched beside Jamal, in first class. "Welcome, sweetheart," she said. "You're going to like it up here." Back in coach, Ethan buckled in. The man on his right gave a small nod of approval. "That was decent of you, kid." Ethan shrugged, eyes forward. "Some seats mean more to some people," he said quietly. The engines began their slow, steady spool up, the sound rolling through the cabin like a held breath about to be released. The safety demonstration began, but a few passengers were still glancing between first class and row 17, as if they'd just watched something they didn't have a word for yet. As the plane began to taxi, Marcus walked down the aisle toward his son. He crouched beside Ethan's seat. "That was your call?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "I figured he might remember it longer than I would." Marcus studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Good trade." In first class, Maya was showing Jamal how the seat controls worked. She didn't think about the cameras or the trending hashtags or the news clips. She just thought about how small the boy had looked back in coach, and how much taller he seemed already. The plane reached the runway threshold. The engines surged, the cabin tilted back, and the ground fell away. For a moment, the world outside was all clouds and sunlight, the kind of view that made borders and hierarchies feel like smaller things than people often believed. Up front, Jamal pressed his face to the window. In coach, Ethan closed his eyes and let the hum of the climb settle over him. Across the aisle, a teenage girl filmed the moment discreetly, her phone angled just enough to capture the boy in first class and the brother in coach. The clip would surface online before they landed. The caption simple, "Some seats you give away." 30 minutes into the flight, Marcus walked up to check on Maya and Jamal, then back to Ethan. "You know," he said quietly, "sometimes the smallest thing you do ends up being the one people remember." Ethan smiled faintly. "Then I'm glad he's the one who gets remembered this time." Marcus rested a hand briefly on his son's shoulder, then moved back to his own seat. He knew this moment wasn't just a gesture. It was the quiet reinforcement of everything they'd been through. The captain's voice broke in over the intercom, announcing their cruising altitude. In first class, Maya and Jamal were talking about school trips. In coach, Ethan pulled out a notebook and began to write. Not homework, not even notes for class, but something looser, as if trying to catch a thought before it drifted away. As the flight attendants began service, a passenger in coach leaned across the aisle toward Ethan. "That was big-hearted of you," she said. Ethan didn't look up from his page. "It was just a seat," he said. "No," she said gently. "It was a bridge." The words stayed with him for the rest of the flight. When the seatbelt sign lit again for descent, Jamal craned his neck to find Ethan and Coach and gave him a shy thumbs up. Ethan returned it, quick and easy, then went back to looking out at the clouds breaking apart to reveal the grid of streets below. The tires hit the runway with a soft thud, the engines reversing, the cabin swaying gently, and for the first time all day, every single person on that plane seemed to exhale together. The captain welcomed them to their destination. People gathered their belongings, and just as passengers began to stand, Marcus leaned into the aisle toward his children, one in first class, one in coach, and said, "We're not done yet." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" Marcus's eyes flicked toward the jet bridge outside. "There's someone waiting for us." The flight took off, but the movement stayed grounded on Earth. Taxiing to the gate, Ethan could still feel the echo of the runway in his ribs. The passengers around him unlatched seatbelts, and the soft scramble of travel resumed. Phone screens lighting, overhead bins yawning open, an orchestra of zippers and sighs. Up front, Maya leaned across the aisle to bump Jamal's fist one last time. In coach, Ethan slid his notebook into his backpack and looked toward the front where Marcus stood in the aisle, angled just enough to see past the curtain. "There's someone waiting for us," Marcus had said. The words followed Ethan down the aisle. As they shuffled toward the door, he scanned the jet bridge through the porthole. No media scrum, no flash, just silhouettes, still as punctuation marks. The door chimed. Simone stood by the threshold, hand on the frame, eyes bright. "You did good today," she murmured to Maya, and then to Ethan, as he passed. "Both of you." They stepped into the jet bridge's tunnel of light. A hush met them. Not the sterile quiet of machinery, but the kind people make when they're trying to hold a feeling steady. At the far end, a small group waited. Captain Halbrook, still in uniform, an airport station manager with a stiff smile, a woman in a dark blazer with a lapel pin that said S in it. "Mom?" She stepped out from behind the aide, smile breaking, eyes already wet. Danielle Carter, still in her work heels, hair swept back the way she wore it when she had to move fast and look unflappable. "Hey, you two," she said, and the whole long day folded for a moment into the simple fact of her arms. Maya reached her first, bassinet quick in the way small bodies can be. Ethan followed, slower, because he was 14 now, and had learned that relief sometimes knocks you back a step before it lets you forward. Danielle held both of them, then looked over their shoulders at Marcus. "You kept your promise." "I don't miss landings," Marcus said, and something in the room laughed, the kind of laughter that releases stored air without asking anybody to pretend nothing happened. The senator's aide stepped forward, polite but not plastic. "Mr. Carter, Miss Carter, Senator Whitcomb asked me to be here. She'll call again this evening. She wanted you to know the first draft of the bill went to Legislative Council, and your names are on the acknowledgments page." "We didn't write it," Ethan said quietly. "You changed it," the aide replied. "That counts." Behind them, Halbrook cleared his throat. "Thought you might want these," he said, offering 2 small plastic wings and a third pin shaped like a paper airplane. "They don't hand out the wings much anymore." Seemed right. Maya accepted hers and pinned it to the strap of her backpack with ceremony. Ethan took his and tucked it into his notebook, where it left a little triangle indentation like a promise pressing through the paper. The unexpected twist was gentle, not dramatic. A cluster of frontline employees from other carriers stood just beyond the jet bridge. 2 gate agents, a baggage handler with grease on his cuff, a flight attendant in red lipstick, whose mask hung below her chin like a flag at rest. They weren't there to apologize for anyone. They were there to look at the Carters and say something rare and complicated. "We saw what you did, and we want to work in a place worthy of it." One of the agents stepped forward, early 50s, eyes steady. "I quit this job in '02, she said, voice low. "Came back last year. I promised myself I wouldn't let the old habits breathe again. Today, you gave me a new way to keep that promise." She held out a folded note with a phone number. "If you start something bigger, call me. I'll train whoever you need." Marcus took the note and slid it into his wallet next to the handwritten one he'd given the kids that morning. "First class because you deserve it." He held both pieces of paper for a second, the day's first letter and its last, and understood how a life can be measured in the words you choose to carry. Outside security, the arrivals hall thrummed. Word of the flight had moved faster than luggage. A local TV van idled at the curb, but no microphone lunged. The story had enough footage. What it wanted now were outcomes. They walked as a family, their pace normal, their faces open. A stranger at a rental car counter lifted a hand in a small salute. A TSA agent, off shift, in jeans and a hoodie, murmured, "For what it's worth, I filed 2 reports today. Your names help." An older man in a veteran's cap said nothing, just touched the brim and kept moving. By the time they reached baggage claim, the someone waiting had multiplied into a kind of chorus, not in volume, but in accumulation. A school counselor, a pastor, a woman in scrubs who whispered that her niece had cried when she watched the video, and then asked for a notebook to write down everything she felt. Danielle listened and said thank you, and made space for others to speak. Marcus shook hands like a person who knows the difference between being recognized and being useful. They stepped out into the late light, and the thin autumn air cut cleanly through the day's leftover heat. At the curb, a sedan idled. Their driver held a sign that said Carter, in block letters, no flourish. They piled in, backpacks, the envelope from FAA, the apology letter that wasn't nothing, and the car pulled away from the terminal, with its hands-free voice, announcing the route like it was any other Tuesday. On the drive, Danielle watched the kids in the rearview mirror. "Tell me everything," she said. Ethan did, the way he could. Facts, beats, the parts where he had been afraid but had held still anyway. Maya filled in the colors, the way the crowd looked at them like weather, the tone of the agent's voice when she said appropriate, the exact pitch of the printer error beep that had made her heart skip. Marcus listened. He didn't interrupt. He just asked questions where the story needed a rung to climb. When they finished, he turned the conversation away from the airport, without pretending the airport wasn't still in the car. "Dinner," he said. "What's it going to be?" "Pancakes," Maya said, immediate. "For dinner." "Waffles," Ethan countered, "with fruit," and he paused, pretending to consider the gravity of the matter. No one is allowed to say appropriate about syrup. "Deal," Danielle said, and they laughed, and it wasn't a cure but it was medicine. Back home, the kitchen lights made small halos on the countertop. Marcus mixed batter with the precision that made his emails lethal. Ethan cut strawberries with a pilot's focus. Maya set the table and placed the apology letter beside the napkins, then moved it again before deciding it belonged on the fridge under a magnet. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder that apologies can be receipts or they can be promises. Time would tell which this one was. While the griddle hissed, Marcus opened his laptop and a new document titled itself before he could name it. Project date open. Danielle raised an eyebrow. "You're incapable of letting a night just be a night," she teased. "I'm incapable of wasting momentum," he said. He typed an outline: nonprofit, travel equity, legal clinic pop-ups at major hubs, gate agent whistleblower fund, annual report card for carriers. He paused, then added a line at the top: "Start small. Start now." He closed the laptop without saving, muscle memory going rogue, and for a moment his heart climbed. Then he laughed at himself and clicked save properly, because movements die less from opposition than from disorganization. They ate at the kitchen island. Plates warm, syrup a glittering amber in the cheap light. The TV in the living room played low, a nighttime anchor sitting with a panel that included a former airline exec and a civil rights attorney. The ticker at the bottom scrolled: FAAIA, issues interim guidance. Westsky pledges industry-wide push. During a lull, Maya asked the question that had been sitting behind everything like a bass note. "Are we different now?" "Yes," Danielle said softly. "And also no." Ethan frowned. "That's not an answer. It's the only honest one," Marcus said. "You did something hard in a place where nobody asked you to be brave. That changes you. But it doesn't mean you'll have to be brave like that every day. It means the next time you need to be, you'll know you can." Maya thought about Jamal watching the clouds from 2A. "He'll remember," she said. "So will you," Marcus replied. The doorbell rang. For a heartbeat they all looked at each other. The day wasn't done with surprises. Marcus opened the door to find a small cardboard box, and no person in sight. The label said from Kayla Communications. Inside, beneath brown paper, were printed signs: Passenger Equity Standard, Know Your Rights. A note sat on top: "We're posting these tomorrow. Thought you might want the first one." Danielle held up a sign and laughed. "Decor for the garage? Front hall," Marcus said. "Let people know where they're walking." Later, when the dishes were stacked and the house had settled, Ethan sat at his desk under the poster of a moonlit skyline. He opened his notebook to the page where he'd tucked the plastic wings. He wrote a sentence, then crossed it out, wrote another. Simpler: "Dignity is the only upgrade they can't take back." He stared at the line until it felt true enough to close the book on. Then he turned out his light and lay awake a little longer than he wanted to. replaying tiny things. Simone's eyes, the cut of Halbrook's chin, the weight of the gate agent's stare, and found that for the first time since morning, none of those images had the power to shove him out of himself. In her room, Maya taped Jamal's drawing, the one he'd given her at the end of the flight. A crayon plane with two small figures in the front row, and another waving from Coach beside her mirror. Under it, she wrote in block letters, "Don't shrink to fit it." She didn't know if she'd be brave next time. She did know she'd have words when she needed them. On the porch, Marcus stood with Danielle and watched the street. A neighbor walked a dog that stopped to sniff a patch of grass, like it was the most important work of the night. Above them, a plane traced a white thread against the dark, moving from one city to another without knowing anything about what had changed on the ground below. "Tomorrow," Danielle said, not as a threat or a promise but as a fact. "Tomorrow," Marcus agreed. He slipped his hand into hers, and for once let stillness be the work. The story kept traveling without them. In airports, new posters went up. In break rooms, facilitators asked uncomfortable questions and stayed in their seats for the answers. In comment sections, the noise quieted just enough for a few good sentences to be heard. And in homes like theirs, kids watched the clip and learned a vocabulary that didn't exist yesterday. It didn't fix everything. It wasn't supposed to. It tilted the floor a degree toward fair and asked people to keep pushing. When the last light went off and the house exhaled, Ethan's final thought before sleep was not about first class, or cameras, or policies. It was Jamal's face at the window, the sky opening like a door. He didn't know what the hearings would look like, or how loud the backlash would be, or whether the signs would curl at the edges and have to be replaced. He only knew what his father had made plain. Dignity is worth more than any ticket. And once you taste it, you don't hand it back. If a father can stop every flight in an airport to protect his children's dignity, we can stop looking away when injustice walks right past us. Stand where it's hardest. Speak when it's quiet. Type yes if you believe silence should